Hey guys, tonight we're going way back, like dusty parchment and wooden spoon levels of back. You're not a knight, you're not royalty. You don't even own your own name half the time. You're a serf in medieval England, born into the land tied to it tighter than a leaky thatched roof in January. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this story. But hey, that's half the fun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment with your city and the time you're listening. Always fun to see who else is out there staring at the ceiling and avoiding tomorrow. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're jolted awake by the dull clang of a distant church bell. Not the kind of wake-up call that gently eases you into consciousness. It's more like being yanked out of a dream by a rusty frying pan. The sky outside your tiny window slit is still black. That slow winter black that just sits and waits. It's cold. Very cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones like regret. You curl up tighter under the scratchy wool blanket, but there's no use pretending. That bell is summoning everyone, and if you're not moving, someone else will make sure you do. You sit up and immediately regret it. Your neck is stiff, your feet are numb, and there's something suspiciously crunchy under your straw-stuffed mattress. Mice? Probably. You kick off the blanket and swing your legs down onto the dirt floor. It's uneven, damp, and cold enough to remind you that shoes are a luxury you only pretend to have. There's no fireplace here, just a fire pit in the middle of the room, the ashes still faintly warm from last night's pitiful excuse for a blaze. Your home, if you can call it that, is a one-room hut shared with your wife, 2 children, and your cousin who never left after the last harvest. The roof is thatched, made of straw that leaks when it rains and occasionally drops the odd insect into your stew. Smoke from the hearth has stained the beams black and clings in the air just low enough to sting your eyes. There's no chimney, just a hole that may or may not let more rain in than smoke out. You glance around. Your eldest is already awake, rubbing sleep from his eyes with one hand and clutching his small wooden cross in the other. Your wife is trying to stoke the fire with a bit of dried dung. It smells rustic. Breakfast, such as it is, will be whatever grain mash she managed to soak overnight. Probably barley, maybe rye, definitely bland. You head outside to relieve yourself, and that's its own adventure. There's no privy, just the usual spot behind the hedgerow. You do your business under the blank stare of a curious goose. One of the lords, of course. Everything on this land is the lord's, including, technically, you. As you walk back in, stretching limbs that never seem to unknot, your stomach growls. But first, boots. You slip on a pair made from stitched leather that's so worn it's more idea than actual footwear. You've patched them with twine and hope. They squeak when wet and crunch when dry. The bell rings again, louder this time. It's coming from the stone church in the centre of the manor. Up on the hill like a smug stone toad, watching the muddy anthill of peasant life below. The sound means one thing: demesne work today. That's the land directly owned by the lord, and you, lucky duck, are expected to toil on it instead of your own meagre strips. You sip your gruel, lukewarm and lumpy, and pull on your wool tunic, which smells vaguely of smoke, sweat and wet sheep. Your belt is a piece of rope. Your hands already feel dry and cracked just looking at the sky. It's going to be another long day. Outside, others are already gathering. Everyone looks as tired and grey as you feel. The reeve, the lord's glorified hall monitor, is stalking down the road with his staff, barking names. His robe is cleaner than yours, his shoes are real shoes, and his nose is so high in the air it's a miracle he doesn't trip over every rut in the road. You nod at old Meg, who's limping on a twisted foot she got during last year's harvest. She's still expected to work, of course, no sick days in serfdom. If you can crawl, you can hoe. There's a man next to you muttering under his breath about the bell ringer sleeping in the priest's hayloft with the miller's daughter. Classic. The manor bell, by the way, isn't just some nice wake-up chime. It's the heartbeat of the estate. It tells you when to rise, when to eat, when to pray, and when to start digging trenches in a field that isn't even yours. Bells control your life more than any written law, and you can't even read those. You start walking to the domain fields with the others, your breath forming little clouds in the frigid air. The mud squelches underfoot, geese scatter, a dog barks, someone's baby is crying behind you, maybe yours. Doesn't matter, someone will hush it. As you walk, you catch a glimpse of the manor house in the distance. Stone walls, smoke rising from the chimney, a roof that doesn't leak. You've never been inside, probably never will. But once, when your father was young, he got called up to bring barley to the kitchens and swore he saw a wall covered in painted cloth and a table so long it could seat 20. You thought he was exaggerating. Now, you're not so sure. By the time you reach the fields, the sun has barely risen. It's the kind of thin sunlight that doesn't bother warming anything. You take your spot and prepare to start working. Tools are shared, and the one you get has a splintery handle and a wobbling head. Still better than nothing. Your first task, clearing rocks, it never ends. The land itself seems to spit up new ones each year, like it resents being farmed. As you stoop down and pick up a jagged stone, you think about something the travelling friar said last week, that serfs are closest to God because they suffer the most. You're not sure if that was supposed to be comforting. Still, you press on, because it's what you do every day, until you can't. And that bell, it'll keep ringing long after you're gone. You shuffle back toward your hut as the day's first labour ends, only for a moment. Mid-morning comes with no fanfare. Just aching shoulders and a few grumbled curses pass between neighbours. Everyone's heading back home for a quick bite before being summoned again. You walk slower now, soles sore from uneven ground, and whatever that mystery squish was near the cow track. You try not to think about it. It's probably best not to know. The path curves past other huts, all just as sad and slumped as yours. Some are newer, their thatch less patchy. Others lean sideways like they've given up. Your home squats somewhere in between, still standing, but only because gravity hasn't gotten the memo yet. The walls are wattle and daub, a glorious combination of sticks, mud, dung, and desperation. You helped patch a hole in the south side last summer, after a neighbour's goat decided to headbutt it repeatedly. It held, mostly. As you approach, smoke curls lazily from the fire hole in the roof, signalling someone's made the effort to reignite the hearth. You duck inside, your shoulders brushing the lintel as you enter. It's darker inside than you remember. A grey haze floats in the air, heavy with the smell of damp wool and boiled grain. Your wife turns as you step in, cheeks flushed from tending the fire, and hands you a wooden bowl. You peer into it, barley gruel again, this time with a few bits of turnip floating like survivors on a sea of beige. The floor, packed earth, is uneven and cold, scattered with rushes that are supposed to keep things tidy but mostly just trap smell and crumbs. Your youngest, still toddling, crawls through them like a determined beetle, waving a stick that's probably been through the goat pen at some point. You don't stop him. He's happy. That's rare. The single window slit near the door lets in just enough light to reveal the cobwebs clinging to the ceiling beams. A large spider watches from one corner, like it's judging your life choices. There's no privacy here, not just because of the one-room setup, but because even your walls seem to breathe in your conversations and exhale them to the neighbours. Your cousin sits on the floor by the fire, sharpening a dull blade that used to be a sickle, and now looks more like a crescent moon with arthritis. He grunts in greeting, doesn't look up. You've known him since you were kids. You both once thought you might leave this place. Then taxes happened, and weather, and a pig that vanished under mysterious and expensive circumstances. You eat in silence, listening to the soft pop of firewood and the occasional fart from the family dog. His name is Lick, because he licks everything, including your face while you sleep, which is deeply unsettling but strangely comforting in winter. In the corner, a rough wooden chest holds all your family's worldly possessions. 2 spare tunics, an iron pot, a cracked cup that belonged to your grandfather, and a leather pouch with 3 copper coins you've managed not to spend, for now. You don't know what you're saving them for, maybe for the market. Maybe just because having coins makes you feel slightly less invisible. There's no bed, of course, just a raised straw mattress that's flattened into something resembling a damp mat. It smells faintly of mildew, sweat and goats, probably because your son let one nap on it last week. It's still freezing, by the way. The fire helps, but not much. The walls aren't insulated, and the wind finds its way through every crack. Sometimes it sounds like someone's whispering outside. You know it's just the wind, but still. You pull your cloak tighter around you and wonder, not for the first time, what it must be like to sleep somewhere dry. Somewhere where you don't wake up to find snowflakes in your eyebrows. Your wife breaks the silence. Reeve says there's a cart coming from the Lord's stables this afternoon. Might need lifting. You nod, not thrilled. And he says the priest wants more help clearing brambles around the chapel. You sigh. Of course he does. The priest's idea of holiness seems to involve a lot of unpaid manual labour, and very little divine patience. You rest a moment longer before rising. There's always something to be done. You need to check the fence around your tiny garden plot, the one patch of land technically yours. Last week a hole appeared, and you're certain it's that same goat again. The one you can't prove belongs to your neighbour, but it definitely does. Outside, the wind cuts sharper now, but the sun's trying its best. A watery disk in the sky. Weak and half-hearted. You trudge to the back of your hut where the garden lives, or tries to. It's mostly leeks, onions, and a few stubborn cabbages that refuse to die or grow properly. You find the fence sagging again, and one post leaning like a drunk. You drive it back into the ground with a stone and a few angry words. There's a low thrum in the air, like the village itself is sighing. From the hill you hear the soft ring of a handbell. Mass is starting. You glance toward the church, sown and cold and always slightly damp inside. Guys, you'll go, of course. Everyone does. But not yet. You have another hour, maybe 2 before you're called again. You pass old Hob as he limps by with a bundle of firewood tied to his back. He gives you a toothless grin and mutters something about a dream he had last night, where the reeve was eaten by wolves. Best dream I've had in years, he chuckles. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because laughing feels better than thinking. By the well, a few women gather, whispering. You hear snippets. Someone's daughter is sick. A cow gave birth to a calf with 2 tails. The miller's been shorting flour again. The usual news. The kind that flits through the village like smoke, wrapping around every door and slipping into your ears whether you want it or not. You head back inside for a moment's warmth and find your wife darning your tunic. She's good at it. Tight little stitches that hold everything together. She once joked that if the tunic were any older, it could vote. You didn't laugh then. You kind of regret that now. You sit beside her. She leans her head on your shoulder just for a moment, and you both listen to the baby snore. It's peaceful, briefly, and you know it won't last, but in this one breath of stillness, the world feels less heavy. Outside, the wind picks up again. You can hear it rustling the thatch, whispering through the cracks, stirring the old spider into action above you. Another day, another bowl of barley, another leak to plug. This is life, your life. Not glamorous, not heroic, just muddy, smoky cold and somehow still yours. You're back out in the cold again, naturally. The fire's burned low and you are not about to waste what little fuel you have just to feel your toes. Not when there's still work to do. Not when the reeve might show up again with more orders, and definitely not when the afternoon chill sinks in like a vengeful ghost. Your breath mists in front of you as you make your way toward the tool shed. Or what passes for one, a lopsided lean-to next to the grain store, held together by spit, mould and someone's wishful thinking. You're looking for something sharp. Not too sharp, nothing in this village has been truly sharp in years, but sharp enough to hack through some overgrowth around your corner of the strip fields. That's the part of the land you're allowed to farm for yourself. The catch? Your field is a scattering of long, thin strips doled out like weird jigsaw pieces across the manor's best and worst soils. If you had a single neat square to plant your barley, life might be simple. But no, this is England, where logic takes a back seat to tradition and tradition forgot to bathe. You find a half-rusted billhook with a blade that leans slightly to the left. Just like your cousin after 2 pints of cider. It'll do. The strips are a good 15-minute walk from the hut, winding past other serfs' land and the occasional smug-looking cow. The wind whistles low through the hedges, and somewhere a crow calls out like it's laughing at you. You resist the urge to caw back. Barely. The ground's uneven, pocked with old hoof prints and new molehills. You trip once, curse twice, and keep going. As you near your first strip, you pass Agnes, the widow with a spine like a shepherd's crook and a glare that could curdle milk. She's bent over her plot, muttering about weeds. You wave, because not waving invites curses. You don't know if she's truly a witch, but you're not about to test it. Your own strip sits in the middle of 3 others, 2 of which are far better tended. It always feels like your land resents you. The soil clumps together like day-old porridge, and the weeds have organised into some kind of tiny army. You set to work anyway, hacking at the brambles that crept in during the past week. It's not glorious labour, but it's yours. Well, mostly. As you work, your mind drifts. It always does out here. You think about last year's frost that ruined half your crop. You think about that one time your barley grew just a little too well, and the steward accused you of holding back some for yourself. You had to give up your winter ale ration just to prove you hadn't. Still stings. You pause to straighten your back and spot something odd. A little pile of stones near the corner of your strip arranged like someone had started a game and forgot about it. You nudge them with your boot. Underneath? Mushrooms. The weird kind, pale and bulbous with dark gills, the kind the herbalist says either heal fevers or cause fits. Possibly both. Speaking of odd, your neighbour William, yes, that William, the one who keeps 3 pigs and an ego the size of the church bell, once swore he saw lights moving across the field at night. Floating ones. Fair folk, he said, spirits from the old forest. You had laughed. Not because you didn't believe him, but because if you did believe him, you'd never sleep again. You finish clearing the worst of the mess from your strip and plant a few turnip seeds you traded for last week. Turnips aren't glamorous, but they don't die easily. You respect that. As you pat the soil down, you think about how your whole life is just seasons on repeat. Dig, plant, wait, harvest, beg for rain, pray for sun, and try not to die of some mysterious rash. Of course, even if the harvest is good, most of it doesn't go to you. The Lord takes his cut first, always. What's left gets divvied up between your family, the church, the miller, who grinds your grain and always keeps a scoop for himself, and maybe a chicken or 2 if you're lucky. And then, of course, taxes. There's always taxes. You sling the billhook over your shoulder and make your way toward the second strip. It's better soil, but worse access. You have to cross through Old Man Thatcher's patch, and he guards his land like it contains buried treasure. You raise a hand as you pass. He scowls at you, just like always. It's his default expression. Your strip here has started to flood again. There's a dip near the edge where water collects after every rain, and it hasn't drained properly in weeks. You squish your way through it, planting your boots in sticky mud that tries to keep them. You sigh. You'll have to dig a trench later, or maybe convince your cousin to do it by promising the last turnip from winter. As the sun slides a little lower, you realise how long you've been at this. The sky's still grey, but there's a thin stripe of amber where the clouds break. You take a moment to stand, hands on your hips, and just look. It's not pretty. It's a mess. But it's yours. Well, sort of. The thing is, you don't own this land. Not really. You're allowed to use it because your father did, and his father before him, and so on, stretching back like a sad, muddy family tree. You're bound to the manor, to the Lord, to this life. You can't just pack up and move to the next village. You'd need permission, and money, and more luck than you've had in years. You know this. But still, on days like today, when the wind is quiet and the land feels less cruel, a part of you imagines what it would be like to own the soil beneath your feet. To work it for your own gain. To plant a row of barley and know that every grain is yours. Of course, that's not how it works. Not here, not for you, not yet. You head back home with mud-caked boots and a sore back. The sun slipping behind the hills and the air smells of smoke and sheep. As you pass by the church, you see the priest standing outside talking to a man in fine clothes. Probably the steward from the neighbouring manor. They're laughing about something. You don't ask what. When you finally step into your hut, the warmth of the fire greets you like an old friend. Your wife hands you a mug of weak ale, and your son proudly shows you the dead rat he found. You pretend to be impressed. The rat gets tossed. The moment stays. Later, as you curl up beside the fire, your belly half full and your muscles tired, you close your eyes and think about your land again. Maybe this year will be different. Maybe the harvest will be good. Maybe one day you'll grow more than you owe, and maybe pigs will fly. You wake to the sound of rain tapping at the thatch above you like 1,000 tiny fingers trying to break in. It's still dark, naturally. Morning doesn't ask your permission. It just shows up, dumps a pile of cold water on your roof, and waits to see what you'll do about it. You sit up, joints creaking like old barn hinges. Your legs ache, your hands are cracked, and your back has opinions about yesterday's trench digging. Today is domain day again. That means your labour belongs to the Lord, not to your family. Whatever you plant, plough or harvest out there ends up in his granary, not your pantry. The whole thing feels like a scam because it is, but it's an old legal God-approved scam, and that makes it harder to argue with. Not that anyone would listen. You're a serf. Your choices are work or suffer, or, well, work and suffer. Those aren't opposites. They're a package deal. You throw off the damp wool blanket, avoiding the corner where a slug has taken up residence. The fire's out. Again? The hut smells like smoke, wet straw and sleep. You shuffle toward the door and duck outside into the grey light. Your breath clouds in front of you. The cold stings, but it's the kind of sting you're used to. Annoying, but not dangerous. Yet, at the meeting point near the manor, others are already gathering, hunched against the wind and wrapped in cloaks that barely keep out the cold. You fall in beside them, exchanging nods, a few tired grunts, and the occasional joke about how wet your feet already are. Someone mutters that the Lord's horse got new shoes last week while his children are still running barefoot. No one laughs, but no one argues either. You're sent to the fields west of the manor today. Stony ground, slightly uphill, exposed to every gust of wind and worst of the rain. The steward gives you a long look and points at the oxen. They're yours today. Fantastic. Nothing like being paired with two half-blind, flatulent animals that respond to commands about as well as your 3-year-old. The oxen are huge, muddy beasts with blank stares and bellies that churn audibly. You tie them to the plough and spend 10 minutes convincing them to move forward, not backward, and definitely not sideways. The ground sucks at your boots, each step a squelching argument with the earth. The plough shudders over stones, jolting your arms with every bump. As you work, rain drips from your hood into your eyes. The mud clings to your legs, your hands, even your eyebrows. You're soaked before you even finish your first row. This isn't the kind of satisfying exhaustion that comes with harvesting your own crop. This is bone-deep, soul-scraping labour that will end with nothing to show for it, could you suppose, except a sore spine and the Reeves approval, which isn't even guaranteed. A crow watches from a tree branch and when done, head cocked like it's silently judging your technique. You consider yelling at it, but decide it's not worth the energy. Somewhere to your left, someone starts singing. It's a low, wordless tune, more rhythm than melody, but it helps. You join in after a while, not because you're particularly musical, but because it makes the plodding rhythm of the oxen feel slightly less endless. The rain, of course, doesn't care. It keeps falling, drumming on your hood, splashing into furrows, turning the field into a swamp. By mid-morning, the wind picks up. It smells of manure and mildew, and the vague, sad scent of wet wool. One of the oxen tries to veer off into a ditch to chew on something that might have once been a cabbage. You yank at the yoke, swear softly, and steer it back on course. The steward rides by on a horse, naturally, sitting dry and smug in his leather boots. He says nothing, just surveys the field like a man checking his pantry. You wonder if he even knows your name. Probably not. To him, you're one of them. A blur of faces that ploughs and plants and occasionally dies in inconvenient ways. Lunch comes late. And by lunch you mean a piece of coarse rye bread you've carried in your cloak pocket, now soggy and speckled with hay. You eat it under a tree, crouching low as the wind gusts. Someone offers you a bit of dried apple. You offer a joke in return. It's not a fair trade, but it's enough. You take a few minutes to stretch your back and glance around. Beyond the plough lines and hoof prints, the manor house rises in the distance, stone, solid, indifferent. You imagine what it must be like inside, a hearth with actual firewood, food that's been cooked instead of just burned, clothes that don't itch. You've never even been close to that house except on tax day. And that was just to stand in line, hat in hand, while the steward or bailiff collected whatever sad offering you managed to scrape together. Eggs, cheese, the occasional chicken that always looked as confused as you felt. Last year you offered a sack of grain and were told it wasn't enough. You had to borrow from your cousin to make up the difference. You're still paying him back in turnips. By afternoon, the rain has turned the field into a slip and slide of misery. Your boots are soaked through and your toes feel like wet stones. You slip twice, land hard once, and get a lecture from the Reeve about sloppy form. You bite your tongue. He's got a wooden staff and a short temper. He's also been known to rat people out for laziness, real or imagined. Still, he's a serf too. Chosen by the Lord, yes, but not above you in any meaningful way. Just better fed and worse liked. Eventually the bell rings again, the end of the workday. Not that it really ends. You still have to make it back home, tend your animals, patch your roof if it leaked, and prepare your own fields if the weather allows, but the Lord's done with you, for now. As you trudge back, soaked and sore, someone behind you asks if you're going to the church tonight. There's a Saints' Day Mass, apparently. You nod, mostly because saying no invites raised eyebrows and whispered judgments. And maybe, just maybe, there'll be bread afterward. By the time you reach your hut, you're exhausted in that dull, hollow way that goes beyond muscles. Your wife helps you peel off your cloak and hands you a small bowl of onion stew. It's thin, mostly water, but warm. The baby sleeps in the corner. Your cousin snores already. The fire crackles softly. You sit, eat, and stare at the flames. Your hands are blistered. Your knees ache. Your clothes still smell of wet wool and damp animal. But for a few minutes you're not working. You're just breathing. You wonder, absurdly, if the oxen feel this tired too. Maybe they dream of being wild. Maybe they don't dream at all. You finish your stew, lie down beside the fire, and close your eyes. In your sleep, you're not a serf. You're just someone in a field, planting seeds that are truly your own. Then the bell rings again. You wake before the sun again, not because of the bell this time, but because of a chicken. One of yours, or what passes for yours anyway, has taken it upon itself to flap around the hut like it's possessed. It crashes into a stool, startles the dog, and somehow knocks over the family's only remaining pot. You don't even open your eyes. You just groan and toss an arm over your face. The chicken, of course, is not your property in the legal sense. Nothing truly is. Not the hut you live in, not the land you till, not the very air you breathe if the Lord decides he needs it for something. Everything here, even your own body, belongs to someone else. And if that sounds dramatic, well, try not paying your dues and see how fast your life collapses. You sit up slowly, scratching at the stubble on your chin. Your clothes are still damp from yesterday. The fire's gone out again, which explains the frost clinging to the inside of the wooden door. You can hear your wife muttering under her breath as she tries to relight the hearth with a bit of dry moss and last night's coals. There's a momentary flash of flame, then smoke, and then coughing. Outside, the sky is steel grey, low and threatening. No rain yet, but it's coming. You can smell it in the air. Wet earth, sodden leaves, and the distant sting of manure. You pull on your boots and step out into it, squinting at the horizon like the weather might offer you some sort of answer. Spoiler, it never does. Today the reeve is doing his rounds early. You spot him in the distance, strutting along the main path like a rooster with a badge. He's got a small wooden tally stick and a list of names. Names like yours. He sees you, nods you, and points his staff toward the livestock pens. Your duty today, tending the pigs. Wonderful. Pigs are, well, pigs. Stubborn, noisy, always covered in something foul and mysterious. The Lord keeps a dozen or so in a pen near the back of the estate, and someone, meaning you apparently, has to muck out the straw and toss them scraps while pretending not to gag. As you make your way there, you pass a few other villagers already at work. A woman hauling water from the well with a yoke digging into her shoulders, a boy chasing a sheep that's clearly winning, and two men arguing over who actually owns the hoe they're both holding. You don't stop to chat. The reeve doesn't like dawdling. At the pig pen, the smell hits you like a thirst. It's a ripe, complex bouquet of rot, dung, and wet fur. One of the sows eyes you suspiciously, her snout twitching as she roots through a pile of cabbage stems. You grab a rake and get to it, scooping out foul straw and trying to ignore the squelch under your boots. Every so often a pig lets out a shriek that could wake the dead. You're half convinced they do it just to mock you. As you work, the reeve returns, this time with two others, both older men from the village, both with the hunched posture of people who've spent decades stooping over other people's land. They stand at the fence, talking in low voices about how the steward's taken interest in measuring field yields again. That can only mean more taxes, or worse, reassignment of labour. There's a rumour that another lord down the road is short on workers and might borrow some hands. You clutch your rake a little tighter. Eventually the reeve turns to you. "Pig looks sick," he says, gesturing at one of the smaller animals in the corner. You glance over. It's lying on its side, breathing shallowly, foam bubbling at its mouth. You shrug. "It was like that when I got here." He gives you a long look, then nods. "If it dies, the tithes will be short. Let the steward know." Ah, tithes. Yet another layer of obligation to wrap around your already smothered life. 1/10 of everything you have, or at least everything the church thinks you have, goes straight to God, or more accurately, to the priest who collects it and decides which bits to keep and which to pretend made it to the monastery. He wears nicer boots than you do, which tells you most of what you need to know. You finish mucking the pen and take a break by the low stone wall that separates the livestock area from the rest of the manor grounds. From here you can see the fields, the huts, the smoke curling from the chimneys, and the people moving like ants under a boot. It's not that anyone's watching you closely, it's that everyone is watching everyone. The village breathes like a single creature, and nothing goes unnoticed. Who didn't show up to mass? Who suddenly has an extra chicken? Who's been slipping off into the woods after dark? You've learned to keep your head down, to be just noticeable enough to not look suspicious, but never so visible that someone asks what you've been up to. Later in the morning you return to your hut for a quick bite, if that's not too generous a term. Your wife has saved a chunk of coarse bread and a smear of lard wrapped in a bit of cloth, It's not satisfying exactly, but it keeps you upright. Your son runs in from outside, cheeks flushed and arms covered in mud, proudly holding a frog like it's a crown jewel. You praise his hunting skills and tell him to put it back before it ends up in the stew. After your break, you help your cousin reinforce the wattle fence behind the hut. A boar got through a few nights ago and trampled half your cabbages. The reeve claims it's a natural occurrence, which is convenient, because if you trap a boar, it's poaching and punishable by a fine or a flogging. As you drive a post into the ground with a stone, you hear the clang of the church bell. Not mass this time, it's the signal for afternoon task assignments. Everyone's required to attend the gathering in the central square, where the steward announces what needs doing. It's less a schedule and more a raffle, with the prize being less misery than usual. You join the crowd, nodding at familiar faces. The steward stands atop a stone platform, flanked by the reeve and a bored-looking scribe. He rattles off names and duties: wood gathering, fence repair, cleaning the lord's stables, assisting the miller. Your name is called, followed by the words ditch digging, north path, ditches. Of course, back-breaking, foot-soaking, soul-numbing ditches. You make your way toward the north path with 3 others. The ground here is hard, full of rocks and stubborn roots, but it has to be done. The lord wants better drainage for his riding trails, and your labour is the cheapest tool he owns. As you drive your spade into the dirt, someone mutters, "You ever think about leaving?" You don't answer. Not because you haven't thought about it, but because you have, often. And you're not sure if saying it out loud makes it more dangerous, or more real. The wind shifts as you make your way toward your personal field strips, dragging with it the sour scent of dung, ash, and distant cooking fires. The ditch work has left your arms trembling, your palms blistered, and your boots caked in a layer of mud so thick it feels like walking with bricks strapped to your feet. But the day isn't over, not even close. Now it's time to see if your own little scraps of land have survived the week's weather, and the village livestock's endless appetite for destruction. It's easy to forget just how far-flung your plots are. The open fields that stretch around the manor aren't neat. Tidy squares like you'd find on a modern farm. They're carved into narrow, snaking strips, parcelled out like awkward slices of bread, some wider than others, some nothing more than rocky veins that wind between your neighbours' plots. You walk past a few of theirs now, eyeing the work. Hob the cooper's barley looks strong. Mary from the northern huts has her beans staked high already. And then there's your plot, a mixed bag of maybe this'll grow and the ground was too stubborn to argue with. The arrangement isn't just inconvenient, it's designed to be. The scattered nature of your fields means no serf can consolidate too much good land. It keeps everyone equal, which in this case means equally struggling. Your first strip lies beyond the narrow footbridge, just past the line of sheep who always look mildly offended by your presence. As you cross, one bleats like it's mocking you. You ignore it. It's probably right. Your strip here is planted with rye, or at least was. The recent rains have left part of it waterlogged, and a corner is completely flattened, likely trampled by someone's wandering livestock. You crouch down and run your fingers through the soggy soil, trying not to think about the work ahead. You'll need to replant, maybe reinforce the ridge, but that'll take time you don't really have. As you rise, you hear footsteps behind you, light, hurried. You turn to see Elric, the reeve's younger cousin, practically skipping across the field paths. "The steward's got a new order," he says, out of breath. "He wants all able hands on the eastern field tomorrow. Says the barley's late." You nod, already calculating what that means. Another day taken from your own labour. Another delay in preparing your tiny bean patch. Another chance for weeds to get the upper hand. Elric adds, "Also, he says anyone caught skipping will owe an extra day next week." Of course, you watch him trot off, likely towards someone else's misfortune. Then you return to the task at hand. You walk to your second strip, a thin band of soil between 2 others belonging to families who haven't spoken to each other since the sheep shearing incident 2 summers ago. You don't get involved. Village feuds are like old bruises. They ache when poked but rarely heal. This patch is better. Drier, more fertile. Your turnips are sprouting and one of them, looks almost respectable. You feel a brief flicker of pride. Then you spot a gap in the fence. Again. Probably that goat. You fix it with some spare twigs and a few muttered oaths. As you work, you pass a group of children chasing each other down the path. They're muddy, shrieking, laughing. You spot your son among them, clutching a stick like it's a sword. For a moment you smile. Then you remember you'll need to wake him early tomorrow to help fetch water, and your smile fades. You keep moving, checking each strip in turn, wheat, beans, onions. Each one tells you a story of what the coming season might look like. Right now, it's a story with a lot of ifs and not enough whens. If the rain eases, if the animals stay out, if the steward doesn't commandeer your best patch for another test crop. By now, the sun is dipping, casting long shadows over the fields. You head toward the forest's edge where your final patch lies, barely a strip of soil tucked under the tree line. The path there is rough, less used and less liked. You pass old markers, stones covered in moss, wooden posts carved with fading symbols. This land was once sacred, or feared, depending on who you ask. Now it's just unused, which is why you asked the Reeve last year to let you cultivate here. He agreed, for a price. You paid it in chickens. The good kind too. As you reach the strip, you hear a rustling in the underbrush. You freeze, scanning the woods. A deer, maybe, or a poacher, or something worse. The villagers tell stories, especially about the woods, spirits, witches, lost souls. You've heard them all. Mostly you assume it's nonsense. But you also never walk this way after dusk. The rustling fades. You carry on, inspecting the soil. Good drainage, surprisingly fertile. Maybe the forest's mystery is good for something after all. You plant a few sprouting bulbs, then gather your tools and start the long walk back. As you pass through the fields again, you notice how many paths are trampled, how many fences sag, how many crops already look like they're struggling. It's not just you. Everyone's dancing on the edge of collapse, hoping for a better yield, a gentler tax, a break in the weather. Back at the village, the smell of stew drifts from several huts. Your stomach growls. You pass the chapel and see the priest inside, lighting candles. His robe is fine wool, his sandals clean. He doesn't see you, or maybe he does and pretends not to. Your hut greets you like an old dog, familiar, worn, sagging at the sides. Inside, the fire's going strong. Thanks to your wife's efforts. She hands you a cup of warm ale, thin but welcome. Your cousin is dozing. Your son is asleep on a straw mat, one arm still clutching his wooden sword. You sit. Your wife places a bowl in front of you, barley and cabbage, and again, you eat without complaint. At this point, your taste buds have either adjusted or given up entirely. Later, as the fire dims and the wind howls outside, you lie awake thinking about the fields. Not just your own, but the manor's. The scattered strips, the endless rules, the Reeve's hawk-eyed inspections. You wonder what it would be like to farm a single plot all in one place, to build a wall around it, to keep what you grow. You know it's a fantasy, the strips are the system, and the system doesn't change because you're tired. Still, you can't help but imagine. And in that flickering moment between exhaustion and sleep, you see it clearly. A single field, yours alone, stretching out into the sunset. Then the roof drips on your forehead. Of course it does. There's a special kind of war you fight every time you're asked to plough the Lord's land. Not the sword-clashing, armour-rattling kind of war that ballads are written about. No, this one's quieter, dirtier, and involves two oxen who may or may not be planning your murder. Their names, unofficially, are Stumble and Sulk, and this morning they're in a mood. You wake up before the bell, the sound of wind in the thatch scratching at your dreams. Your legs are still sore from the last-ditch assignment, and one of your shoulders feels like it belongs to someone much older and more broken, but duty waits for no one, and definitely not for someone born without a title. Your wife hands you a slice of rye bread that tastes like it's already halfway to stone. You chew anyway, because chewing means you're still alive, and still alive people owe the Lord 3 days of ploughing this week. It's been declared, and declarations in a manorial court are as final as the word of God, except the word of God might give you a break once in a while. You make your way down to the stable yard where Sulk is already glaring at you with both beady eyes. Stumble is chewing something, possibly a part of the yoke he was tied to yesterday. The plough, of course, is waiting exactly where you left it, in a puddle of brackish water tilted sideways, with a broken strap someone promised to fix 2 weeks ago. You sigh and start gathering the gear. Hooking up the oxen is a process. It involves grunting, shoving, apologising to both animals and God, and occasionally being stepped on. Sulk makes a show of resisting, planting all 4 hooves and pretending not to understand human speech. Stumble walks directly into a fence post. This is normal. Once hitched, you take the reins, clutching the handles of the wooden plough like they're the only solid things left in your world. The field is half frozen mud, and the rows you're meant to carve are as straight and neat as the steward's expectations, meaning utterly unforgiving. The first few steps go fine. Then Sulk decides to veer left. Stumble, eager to join him, slips, dorts, and yanks the entire setup off course. The plough bites the soil at a jagged angle, jars your wrists, and digs a trench that could best be described as creative. You growl and pull back, trying to realign the team before the Reeve notices. Spoiler, the Reeve always notices. He's standing by the fence, chewing on something unidentifiable, and watching with the expression of a man disappointed in everything. "Straight lines, not graves of all," he calls. "This isn't your first week." You force a smile and reply, "No, but it might be my last if Sulk keeps this up." It earns a snort from another serf nearby. The Reeve doesn't laugh, humour is all beneath him, or perhaps above him. The ploughing continues, slow and brutal. Every step feels like pulling teeth from the earth itself. The soil is clumpy, still clinging to the winter chill, and the blade often strikes hidden rocks that jolt the whole contraption like a kick to the ribs. Your hands blister fast, and the rope around your waist digs into your hips as you try to control the oxen's wandering instincts. You take breaks when you can, squatting in the furrows with your cloak wrapped tight, wiping sweat and dirt from your face. The wind howls across the open land, dragging clouds that promise rain. Not now, you think, please not now. Nearby, a boy no older than 12 struggles with a smaller team, 2 donkeys and a plough that looks more like a question mark than a useful tool. He's trying, but the donkeys are less interested in the soil and more in eating each other's tails. You nod at him, he nods back, that's all the encouragement you can spare. Midday comes, and someone passes around bits of salted fish wrapped in stale bread. You eat with one hand, the other still clutching the reins. Sulk uses the pause to try and lie down. You yank him upright with a grunt and the promise of turning him into next winter's sausage. As you finish your meagre meal, an old man passes by the field edge. A beggar, or maybe just someone too broken to work. He carries a wooden staff and mutters to himself in Latin, or something close to it. The Reeve scowls at him but doesn't stop him. Too many broken men to care about everyone. Later, as the light starts to fade into that strange grey pink of early spring, your body gives up pretending. Your legs ache, your arms twitch, and your lower back stages a full revolt. You dig your heels in and push through one more row, then another, and then collapse onto a rock at the field's edge, panting like you've outrun death itself. You watch the others, still working, trudging along their own muddy paths like ghosts in earth-stained linen. Some sing low songs, old field chants meant to keep rhythm and distract from the ache. You try humming along, but your voice cracks and falls silent. And yet, even here, you catch a moment of strange beauty. The clouds part for just a breath, and the fading sun lights the churned earth in gold. The furrows gleam, the oxen steam. You feel for a second like you've carved something eternal into the land. Then Sulk farts loudly, and the moment passes. As you unhook the team and lead them back toward the stables, you wonder, again, how long you can do this. Not just the ploughing, but the whole cycle. The relentless loop of work. Eat, sleep, obey. Your muscles are still young mostly, but your soul feels worn thin, like the reins in your hands, fraying with every pull. At the stable, you brush the oxen down and rub the worst of the muck from their legs. They grunt, ungrateful. You slap Sulk lightly on the flank. "At least you get to lie down now," you mutter. On your way back to the village, the bells ring out again. Even song this time. The priest's voice rises in the distance, muffled by the wind and the chattering of sparrows. You pass the church but don't go in. Your legs wouldn't survive the kneeling. At the hut, the fire is already going. Your wife's face lights up when she sees you, though it fades when she sees your limp. She doesn't ask. She just hands you a bowl and a blanket. You eat in silence, staring into the fire. Your cousin snores in the corner. The dog farts in his sleep. The baby coos, then spits up on the rushes. Just another night. You lie back, staring at the smoke-darkened ceiling. In your mind, you still feel the plough handles, still hear the squelch of mud and the creak of harnesses. Your body may be still, but your memory's still walking the field. You wonder if you'll ever not feel tired. The next morning, the sky is the colour of old pewter. Flat, cold and giving nothing away. You wake up to a shriek, but this time it's not the chicken. It's your son, yelling that the dog has stolen the heel of bread left on the hearth. You groan, roll over, and bury your face in the itchy wool blanket, but the smell of burning peat tells you it's time to get up. Again. Your back feels like it's been beaten with a sack of stones, which frankly isn't far from the truth. After yesterday's ploughing fiasco, you'd hope today might offer something lighter. Something that doesn't involve oxen with vendettas or reeves with judgmental eyebrows. But when you step outside, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, you already know you won't get your wish. Down the lane, a small cluster of villagers has gathered near the common pasture. That's never good. You recognise the shape of the steward's red cloak among the crowd, flapping in the wind like a bad omen. He doesn't visit often unless someone's in trouble or something needs fixing. You trudge toward the group, half curious, half dreading. Turns out it's just a cart. A busted one. One of the wheels cracked clean through, probably from the overloaded barrels of ale someone tried to deliver from the manor's cellar down to the tavern in the neighbouring village. Now it sits lopsided in the mud like a drunk who's lost a fight with gravity. "Fix it," the steward announces. You blink. "Sorry," he gestures broadly. "The cart. I need it by midday." There's no explanation, no asking, no hint of a request. Just the tone of a man who's never fixed anything in his life. So you're fixing a cart now. You don't argue, not because you agree, but because the last man who questioned an order found himself reassigned to mucking out the communal latrine trench for a week. And he'd only asked if he could finish eating first. You kneel by the wheel, inspecting the damage. The axle's not broken, thank the saints, but the wheel's rim is cracked and warped. You'll need to cut a replacement section and wedge it back into shape. It's tedious, splinter-filled work, and the steward hasn't provided tools, of course, just the problem. You jog back to your hut to grab a small axe, only to find your wife standing over the remains of what was once your bread shelf. "The shelf fell," she explains. "Took the pot with it." You stare at the scene, shattered clay, bent nails, crumbs and shame everywhere. You take a deep breath. "I'll fix it later." She nods. "You always say that." She's not wrong. You head back to the cart with the axe and a strip of wood scavenged from the broken shelf. As you cut and wedge the new piece into the wheel, others pass by on their way to their own chores. Old Meg offers you a lump of cheese in exchange for sharpening her sickle later. You agree. Bartering is the only real economy you trust anymore. As you work, a few of the others linger. Tom the younger starts talking about the Reeves' new boots. Polished, real leather, probably taken from the last man who owed too much grain. Someone else mentions that the priest's been receiving more than his fair share of tithed wool, and rumours are swirling. There's always gossip in the village, like smoke drifting between chimneys. You pretend not to listen, but you do. The wheel finally slips back into place with a satisfying thunk. You test it. It wobbles a little, but rolls. It'll hold for now. The steward doesn't thank you, of course, just grunts and stalks off toward the manor. You're left with a splinter in your thumb and a lingering sense of irritation. You wander over to the shaded edge of the pasture, where a few villagers are lounging, chewing on bits of oatcake or whittling wood. You sit, stretch out your aching legs, and finally allow yourself to breathe. The wind is softer here, the grass cool under your hands. Someone nearby cracks a joke about the Lord's wife and her unfortunate habit of fainting during sermons, always right after the offertory. You laugh louder than you should. It feels good, for once. Lunch is late and sad, a chunk of barley bread and a sliver of onion, traded from the neighbour's garden in exchange for helping with a stuck pig last week. It tastes better than it has any right to, mostly because you're starving. You sit beside your wife, who's sewing up a torn hem. She doesn't ask how your morning was. You don't ask how hers was. That's the agreement. In the distance you hear the thrum of the mill. That's where the Lord's grain is ground. And where yours goes too, when you can afford it. Of course the miller takes his cut, officially sanctioned and totally arbitrary. Last time, you brought him a sack of rye and got back a sack that felt suspiciously lighter. He claimed wind loss. You claimed theft. No one sided with you. You decide to check on your own grinding stone back at the hut. It's crude, hand-turned, and slower than watching moss grow, but it's honest. You sit on the stool near the doorway and start grinding a small pile of oats while your son plays with a beetle nearby, deeply invested in whether it's going to fly or not. It does. Right into his face. He screams. You laugh. He laughs. It's a rare moment. Just then a shadow falls across the doorway. You look up to see the Reeve standing there, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You're on patrol tonight," he says. "Patrol?" You blink. He nods. "Lord's orders, forest edge, poachers, maybe wolves." You consider arguing. It's not technically your turn, but your cousin did trade shifts last month without clearing it. So now here you are, gifted the consequences. You nod. Sunset, he adds, and don't forget a torch this time. Of course not. Wouldn't want to stumble into a wolf unannounced. As the sun slips down, bleeding gold across the treetops, you gather your things. A staff, a half-burned torch, a flask with something that might be cider, and head out along the edge of the woods. The forest is quiet, but not peaceful. It hums with the low sounds of insects, rustling leaves, and that occasional creak of a tree that sounds too much like a whisper. You walk the edge, careful to keep your eyes forward and your imagination in check. Shadows stretch and twist. Once you think you see movement just beyond the brambles, but it turns out to be a deer, startled by your steps. You breathe again. There's something oddly calming about the patrol despite the tension. The village feels far away. Out here there are no reeves, no steward, no tithe collectors. Just the crunch of your boots, the crackle of the torch, and the soft chorus of the night. You return to your hut late, muscles aching and eyelids heavy. Your wife's asleep, the fire burned low. You lie beside her, letting the warmth of her back melt into yours. You close your eyes, knowing full well the bell will drag you out of this small peace in just a few hours, but for now, just now, everything is still. The morning fog hangs low over the village, thick enough to make the world feel smaller. You can't see the manor from your door, which is rare. Usually it looms at the edge of your vision like a dull reminder of who owns what, and more importantly, who doesn't own anything at all. You step outside, blinking away sleep and stiffness. Your patrol last night didn't find any wolves or poachers, just a barn owl that scared the life out of you and a lot of shadows that looked like they were plotting something. Today's supposed to be yours, a personal work day, a chance to catch up on planting and fence mending and pretending you're not slowly sinking into the mud of your own existence. You're about to head to your strips when you see him, the tax collector, again. He's here early this year. You weren't expecting him for another 2 weeks, and of course he isn't alone. 2 men-at-arms flank him, chainmail glinting faintly even through the mist. It's not that you're planning on resisting, but they show up anyway, every time, just in case someone's had enough. Your wife joins you at the door, arms folded tightly against her chest. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. You both know what this means. By the time the collector reaches your hut, you've already gathered what you can. A sack of last season's barley, 4 eggs, and a skein of thread your wife spun over the winter. You know it's not enough, but it's everything you can spare without watching your family go hungry next month. He doesn't even pretend to examine your offering with interest. Just ticks a mark on his parchment and glances down his long, pointed nose. "This is light," he says flatly. "I've had bad soil, storms, a goat got into the... A goat," he repeats, unimpressed. You want to argue. You want to tell him how you spent 3 days fixing that fence, how your barley came up thin and pale this year, how you gave up your ale ration just to buy onions to stretch your stew. But what comes out is a quiet, "It's all I've got," he sighs. "You'll owe a make-up tithe. I'll be back before next month's end, double this amount or the steward gets involved." And just like that, he's gone, down the path to the next hut, the next poor soul with more mouths than food and less patience than you. The 2 guards don't speak. They just follow like shadows, boots silent on the wet grass. You return inside, set the empty basket on the floor and sit without speaking. Your wife does the same. The silence is heavy but not unfamiliar. You both know what comes next. A week of smaller portions, tighter belts, and maybe pawning off your spare wool tunic at the next fair if you're lucky enough to get there. By midday you're out in the fields, hacking at a patch of weeds like they owe you money. Every thud of your hoe is angrier than the last. Your son's trying to gather kindling nearby. But the sticks are still wet from last night's rain, and he keeps slipping in the mud. You tell him gently to keep trying. No one has the energy to yell today. Later, you spot your neighbour William lugging a sack over his shoulder toward the Reeves' house. It's got that familiar sag to it. Grain, probably. Maybe some cheese if his wife was feeling generous. You both nod to each other as he passes. No words exchanged. There's nothing new to say. You remember the first time you paid taxes. Your father still alive, standing tall, shoulders straight as he handed over the family's offering to the same red-cloaked collector. You were a boy then, barely old enough to lift a bucket, but you still remember the look on your father's face. It wasn't fear, it was dismissal, and now you understand it. It's not just the food they take. It's the part of you that dares to think you might get ahead this year, that maybe you'll fix the roof or afford a second pair of shoes or buy out an extra blanket for the winter. Taxes don't just take your goods, they rob you of your small, stubborn hope. That evening you sit with your cousin by the fire, going over what little you have left. "We could try selling the goo," he suggests. You shake your head. "We'd never get a fair price. And we need the eggs," he shrugs. Then the thread, or the stool, or your pride. You laugh because he's not wrong, and you've got less pride than you used to. The next day you visit the tithing barn with the reeve. It's a cold, draughty structure on the edge of the churchyard, filled with the scent of dust, old hay, and obligation. The priest greets you with that serene smile he always wears, the one that makes you want to slap it off his face just to see what he looks like without it. You offer a few withered onions and a small flask of cider, the latter brewed from last year's forgotten apples. He accepts it all graciously, murmuring something about divine generosity, and then asks if you'll be helping to repair the chapel roof next week. He says it like it's an invitation, but you both know it isn't. You nod, and he blesses you. On your way out, you glance up at the crucifix above the door. You wonder if Christ would have tithed, or if he would have been right there next to you, barefoot in the field, swearing at oxen and begging the barley to grow. That night your wife pulls you close and says nothing. The stew is thinner than ever. Your cousin snores, the dog whines in his sleep, dreaming of stolen bread crusts and whatever glory lives in the bottom of the chamber pot. You lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling sullen. The soot-stained thatch seems to form patterns now, shapes that look like wings, like maps, like escape routes. You blink, and they vanish. But the thought stays. Just for a second you imagine what it would feel like not to owe anything to anyone. To wake and work and sleep without someone else's hand already in your pocket. Then the baby coughs, the fire cracks, and you remember. You've got until next month to double what you don't have. You want to believe that Sunday is a day of rest. That's what the priest says, after all. He tells the village each week, standing tall in the pulpit, his hands lifted like he's holding up the sky. The Lord hath commanded the Sabbath be kept holy, which, translated into the daily life of a serf, means you still wake before dawn, still trudge through the cold to tend the animals, still patch the hole in the fence a pig knocked out in the night, but you do it a bit faster so you're not late to church. The bell tolls from the chapel on the hill, loud and hollow through the misty morning. The sound rings in your bones whether you want it to or not. Even the dog seems to flinch. You splash your face with cold water, finger comb your hair and pull on your least filthy tunic, the brown one, patched with green, which used to belong to your uncle before he coughed himself into the grave 2 winters ago. Your wife is already wrangling the children into some semblance of order, wiping dirt from their faces with the edge of her apron and hissing threats about what will happen if they fidget through the homily again. Your son, of course, has smuggled a beetle into his pocket. He insists it's clean. It most certainly is not. You file out of the hut and join the line of villagers snaking up the muddy path to the chapel. It's a quiet procession, half reverent, half exhausted. A few neighbours offer nods. No one speaks above a whisper. Sunday may not be restful, but it's solemn, and there's a weight to the day that makes even the loudest children keep their mouths shut. Mostly. The chapel is stone, squat and damp, always colder inside than it is outside, no matter the season. A thick layer of incense tries and fails to cover the scent of mildew. You shuffle into a pew made from uneven boards and squeeze between your cousin and a man who smells like boiled cabbage. Your knees press against the bench in front of you. There's no room to stretch, no comfort, just faith, and the faint hope that today's sermon will be short. The priest enters, clad in heavy wool vestments embroidered with golden thread. He looks well-fed, well-rested, and not at all like someone who spent yesterday shoveling pig dung. You listen as he chants the opening prayers, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Latin. Always Latin. A language you don't understand but have memorized by rhythm. It flows over you like a song you stopped liking long ago but can't stop humming. After the prayers comes the homily. The priest speaks of sin, of duty, of the divine grace bestowed upon those who bear their burdens with humility. The meek shall inherit the earth, he says, which is ironic, considering you already work the earth every day and haven't inherited so much as a pair of decent shoes. He goes on to praise obedience and warns again about the dangers of temptation. Sloth, envy, pride, and worst of all, questioning the order God has set. There's an unmistakable glance at a boy near the back who tried to skip mass last week. The priest knows. He always knows. Gossip travels faster than fleas in this village. You shift in your seat as your legs cramp. Your cousin is already dozing. The priest hasn't noticed yet. Or maybe he's learned to accept it as part of the scenery. After the sermon, there's communion. A crumb of bread, a drop of boy, or some drop of wine. Holy, yes, but barely enough to make a dent in your hunger. Then comes the collection, a small wooden box passed from hand to hand. You drop in your last remaining farthing, not because you want to, but because not doing so will raise eyebrows and questions. You know for a fact the priest has a mental tally of who gives what. After the final blessing, you shuffle out into the grey light, blinking like moles. The rest of the day, in theory, belongs to you. In reality, it belongs to everyone else. The Lord expects attendance at the manor green. The priest wants help repairing the chapel wall. Your wife insists the roof must be patched today, before the next rain drowns the sleeping baby again. Still, there's a brief window, an hour maybe, when the village breathes a little easier. You sit on the grass near the well, arms wrapped around your knees, watching the children chase geese and each other. The beetle your son smuggled in has become the centrepiece of a dirt festival. He names it Sir Crumbles. It promptly escapes. Someone starts playing a pipe, probably James the Cooper's apprentice, and a few others hum along. It's not much of a tune, but it's familiar, and it makes your heart ache in that strange heavy way, like remembering something you never really had. You talk quietly with William about the rumour that a miller's apprentice in the next village was granted freedom in exchange for 20 years of service and a handful of coin. Neither of you believes it, but you still talk about it. After the music fades, you head back toward the chapel with a few others. The priest has asked for volunteers to haul stones from the riverbed, offerings for a new path he wants to lay around the churchyard. A blessing to walk upon holy ground, he calls it. You suspect it's mostly to impress the bishop next time he visits, but still, you go. The work is heavy, but your hands are used to it. You haul rocks, roll them uphill, place them where you're told. The priest offers a blessing halfway through. You'd prefer he offered lunch. By late afternoon, your knees feel like boiled turnips. You return to your hut just as the sun begins to drop. The sky for once is streaked with soft colours. Pale rose, amber, blue fading to grey. The kind of sunset that poets might sing about if they lived in villages like this. But they don't. Poets live in castles, with wine and parchment and firelight. You live here, with stew that tastes like bark and the faint smell of something dead under the floorboards. Supper is quiet. Turnips and lentils. The baby coughs. The dog growls at something outside. Probably another dog. You and your wife don't speak much. You don't need to. The weariness in her face mirrors yours. The children fall asleep easily. You don't. You lie in the dark, listening to the wind push against the walls of your hut like it's trying to find a way in. You wonder, not for the first time, if this is what the priest means when he talks about peace. This stillness, this ache, this silence. It doesn't feel holy, but it's Sunday, and you've survived it. Tomorrow is Monday, and the bell will ring again. The fair only comes once a year, and when it does, it arrives like a thunderclap, loud, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. You wake before the bell, which is a miracle in itself, heart already racing. Today isn't about tilling or ploughing or grumbling at livestock that think they're better than you. Today is about colour and noise and maybe, a bit of joy, if you can steal it. You pull on your least torn tunic and wipe your boots with a damp cloth, which is about as effective as trying to clean a pig with a prayer. Your wife is braiding her hair, a small smile at the corner of her mouth. The children are bouncing like wild things, already sticky with stolen honey and too much excitement. Even your cousin is up early, humming through his tooth gap, trying to decide if he wants to spend his only penny on a meat pie or a chance to throw rocks at the dunking stool. The fair is held on the far side of the manor, just beyond the orchard where the Lord's apples grow fat and smug. Normally you wouldn't dare get that close to the manor house unless summoned. But on fair day the rules bend. Not break, never break, but soften like butter left in the sun. As you crest the hill, you see it. Tents and stalls and carts with wheels that look far too rickety to have made it from the next village. Cloth banners flap in the breeze. Blue, red, yellow, dyed with things you'll never afford. The smells hit you first. Meat sizzling on open fires, pies bubbling in soot-blackened pans, and, somewhere, a pile of fish that clearly went off 2 days ago but are being sold anyway. You're not here to buy much. Let's not get delusional. You've got 2 coppers and a wooden token someone gave you last harvest in exchange for fixing a broken fence. But you're here to see and some to hear, to be, and that's worth something. A juggler tosses fire in the air like it's no big deal. Children shriek with delight. A man with a beard like a broom sells sugared nuts from a wooden tray, calling out rhymes that don't quite rhyme. A woman offers healing stones for a penny each, claiming they cured her husband's gout. You doubt it. Her husband sitting beside her, toes wrapped in cloth, looking miserable. Your son tugs your sleeve and points at the puppet show. The stage is a rickety wagon with curtains made of patched linen, and the puppets themselves look like they've seen too many winters. But the story, the tale of Sir Wulfstan and the Dragon Maid, is told with such gusto that even you crack a smile. The dragon puppet belches smoke. Someone behind you lets out a laugh so loud it startles a chicken. You wander from stall to stall. A man tries to sell you a comb made from cowbone. Good for fleas and charm, he claims, winking. You politely decline. Your wife is eyeing a length of blue cloth. Not fine enough to be silk, not coarse enough to be sack material, just nice. Something that would make a decent dress if there were ever time or reason. She runs her fingers across it once, then steps back without a word. Next, a bard, drunk already, starts singing a song about a knight who fell in love with a fishmonger's daughter. He forgets half the verses and makes up the rest. You've never heard the word eel used so creatively. Everyone claps anyway. Some stalls are temptations disguised as opportunity. A toothless man with an eye patch offers a game of dice. Double your coin, he croaks. You watch as a younger lad loses 3 coppers in 30 seconds and storms off swearing. The man shrugs and resets the dice, still grinning. You pass by a scribe's tent, parchment and ink bottles neatly displayed. He offers to write a letter for a price. Tell your cousin in Norwich you're still breathing, he suggests with a chuckle. You pause. You do have a cousin in Norwich. Haven't heard from him since the last fair, but that's a copper you can't afford to gamble. Just then someone bumps your shoulder hard. You turn, half ready to curse, but it's Thomas, the Thatcher's boy. Watch your pouch, he warns quietly. Pickpockets today. You nod your thanks and pat your belt. Your coppers are still there, nestled tight in a scrap of leather. In the centre of the fair stands the dunking stool. A crowd is already gathered. Today's victim is Ellen, the alewife, accused of watering down her brew. She's shrieking insults as they strap her in, but the crowd laughs. When the stool tips and she hits the muddy water, the crowd roars. She comes up sputtering, curses flying. Someone hands her a towel and a pint. She drinks it defiantly. You like her spirit. You buy a meat pie. It costs both your coppers, but for a few glorious bites it's worth it. The crust is thick and greasy, the filling a mystery blend of probably not rat, and the flavour, divine. Your wife shares it with you, taking a single bite and then handing it back. The rest you guard like treasure. By late afternoon, the fair starts to fray at the edges. The jugglers are tired. The music is off-key, the mud is deeper. A fight breaks out near the cider tent. Someone insulted someone else's sheep. Standard fare. The reeve arrives, flanked by 2 men with staves. They restore order with sharp words and sharper glares. As you turn to leave, your son tugs your hand and points to a man selling carved wooden animals. He's got a little fox, tail curled, eyes wide. 1 penny, the man says. Or a trade. You hesitate, then pull out the wooden token. Fence job last year, you explain. The man squints, shrugs, and accepts. Your son cradles the fox like it's made of gold. You make him promise not to lose it. He promises. He will lose it anyway. Back at the hut, you're sunburned, tired and broke, but your wife has a piece of blue cloth she didn't tell you she'd bought with a bartered skein of wool. Your cousin got a new belt. Your son has his fox, and you have the taste of a meat still on your tongue. And the memory of laughter still echoing in your ears. You fall asleep that night with the noise of the fair still buzzing in your bones. Colour, sound, warmth, all packed into one short day before it vanishes for another year. But you carry it with you, because even in a life shaped by soil and debt, a little wonder can last a long time. The fair is already a fading echo by the time morning rolls in, more drizzle than dawn, with low clouds smothering any hint of sunshine. You wake to find the wooden fox nestled beside your son's head, clutched in one sticky little hand. His cheeks are flushed from sleep, mouth slightly open, breathing the sweet rhythm of someone who doesn't yet understand how cruel mornings can be. You, however, understand perfectly. Today's task is heavier than most. Not physically. No, it's not a ploughing day or a thatching emergency, but it weighs on you in a different way. Today you have to ask permission from the steward to get married. No, not you. You're already yoked to that particular wagon. This is about your cousin. The one who eats too loudly, snores like a dying goose, and accidentally sat on a lit coal last winter. He's finally decided he wants to marry Alice, the blacksmith's niece, and as charming as she is, her smile alone won't get past the tangled mess of manorial law. Because love, like everything else in your life, isn't free. In medieval England, if you're a serf, you don't just marry whoever you fancy. You need permission. Official sealed Lord of the Manor permission. The whole thing feels like asking the baker if you can eat your own bread. But such is life. Your cousin has begged you to go with him for support. You're better with words, he said, which is true if the alternative is him trying to explain anything without breaking into nervous sweating. So you both trudge through the village toward the manor house, your boots squelching in yesterday's leftover fair mud. It's a long walk, made longer by your cousin's stammering rehearsals of what he's going to say. Sir, I mean, Lord, your lordship, I would humbly request... No. What if I bow first? Should I bow? Yes, you say, but not so low you fall on your face. The manor house looms ahead, 2 stories of cold stone and silent judgment. You've never been inside, no one like you ever is, unless it's to deliver grain or chickens or ill news. The door alone is taller than your entire hut. You knock. A servant opens it, a thin boy with a blank expression, and eyes you both like you smell worse than you do, which is impressive. We request audience with the steward, will you say, your cousin already turning pink. The boy grunts, waves you in. The entrance hall is dark, cluttered with tapestries and the overwhelming smell of dried herbs and damp dog. A pair of greyhounds lounge by the hearth, watching you with bored disdain. It takes 10 whole minutes before the steward appears, dressed in rich wool and a sneer. What is it? He asks flatly. Your cousin launches into his prepared speech. It lasts approximately 6 seconds before dissolving into a stutter. You step in. He requests permission to marry Alice of Forge Lane. The steward raises one eyebrow. Does he now? He walks in slow circles around your cousin, like a cat around a trapped mouse. She's from the blacksmith's line, is she not? Free blood on her mother's side. You blink. That could complicate things. If she's free and he's not, the marriage would pull her into his servitude, unless the lord is feeling generous, which he almost never is. Love makes fools of you lot, the steward mutters, then sighs. The lord requires a fee. Of course, you say, heart sinking. He holds up 2 fingers. 2 hens, or 1 silver. Your cousin pales. That's a month of... You nudge him hard before he can argue. We'll find it, you say. The steward smirks. See that you do. Back outside, your cousin groans. 2 hens? I only have 2 hens. You nod. Guess you're about to be henless and married. You stop by Alice's home on the way back, letting her know the situation. She smiles, bright, wide, hopeful. She's already got a piece of fabric for the wedding dress, she says, and her aunt promised to make a flower crown. You envy her optimism. You envy her confidence that love is stronger than obligation. Back at the hut, your cousin starts calculating how to get the hens. Maybe I can trade for one, he mutters, pulling his meagre possessions from a chest, a tin spoon, a crack bowl, a wooden comb with half its teeth. You try not to laugh, it's not helpful. Your wife offers a solution, because she usually does. The Reeve owes us. Remember when I spun that wool for his mother's cloak and he never paid? He has hens. You blink. You're right, so you ought to go to the Reeve. He pretends to forget the cloak, then pretends to remember but insists it wasn't well made. You argue, quietly but firmly. Eventually, he relents, partly because he knows your wife could ruin him in the village rumour circuit. He offers 1 hen and a warning not to tell anyone else he'd bartered down. The second hen comes from old Hob, who can't say no to anything if you ask him in a loud enough voice. He trades it for a promise that your cousin will help thatch his roof next month. A fair deal if the roof doesn't cave in first. By week's end, you return to the manor with both hens in a sack, clucking miserably. The steward inspects them like he's evaluating relics. Acceptable, he says, and marks something down on a scroll. Permission granted. And that's it. No blessing, no sile. Just a bored nod from a man who treats marriage the same way he treats tax ledgers, another piece of property being moved around. Your cousin looks like he might faint from joy. The wedding will be small, of course. Just a priest, a few flowers, a meat pie someone already volunteered to make, and whatever ale the blacksmith can spare. But it will be real. That night, around the fire, you sit beside your wife and watch your cousin practice his vows to the dog. He stammers. The dog looks unimpressed. but it's happening. Do you remember when we got permission, you ask your wife. She smirks. You stank of onions and fell in the mud on the way to the chapel. Romantic, you say. She kisses your cheek anyway, and in a life where everything must be paid for, love, freedom, plot of land, a chance to marry, this is the rare moment where you feel like something might be worth the price, even if it costs you both, of course, you hens. The morning after the wedding, your hut smells like spilled ale, burnt onions, and joy. The fire is down to embers, your cousin's snores rattle the roof, and your wife is already trying to scrub last night's stew out of the rushes. You're sore, not from labour, but from dancing, and badly. Your knees are making noises that no knees should make, and your back has decided to go on strike. But for once, you don't mind. It had been simple. Of course it was. A quick ceremony under the old tree behind the chapel, a few blessings from the priest, who had only charged 1 coin instead of his usual 2, and then a long night of food, music, and the kind of laughter that keeps the cold at bay. The bride wore that bit of blue cloth your wife bartered at the fair. Now cut into a sash, she glowed. Your cousin cried. Someone's goat escaped and ran through the middle of the vows. Everyone agreed it was the most memorable wedding in years. But now the reality sets back in. Marriage for a serf doesn't change the game, it just changes the number of players. Your cousin and Alice will share your hut until he can build a place of his own, which could be months, even years. Wood's not easy to come by, and approval to build on manorial land has to go through the steward, then the reeve, then probably the clouds themselves. Bureaucracy, in its most glorious mud-caked form. Still, the mood is good. Even the chickens seem less angry than usual. You head out to the fields, hoping to get a few hours in before the weather turns. The sky looks unsettled, grey on grey, with a cold wind that's more suggestion than threat. The kind of morning where the air smells like change, but not the good kind. Your son runs after you, wooden fork in hand. "Can I help today?" he asks, eyes wide. You want to say no, not because he's tasteless, though his hoeing technique needs work, but because part of you still wants him to have a few more mornings of beetle chasing and puddle stomping before he has to learn just how heavy the world really is. But the truth is, you could use the help, so you nod, and the two of you make your way through the village paths toward your furthest strip, boots crunching over frost-hardened mud. As you walk, you do talk. About nothing important. He tells you he saw a raven that looked like it was wearing a crown. You tell him he should make it king of the scarecrows. He laughs like it's the funniest thing he's ever heard. You make a mental note to remember this moment, because something about it feels rare and fragile. At the field, you hand him the smallest hoe, and the two of you work side by side. He sings to himself, something tuneless and full of made-up words. You dig in silence, the rhythm of the work grounding you. For all its pain, farming has its own kind of peace, the kind that comes when you stop thinking and just move, breath by breath, row by row. Until he asks, "Will I have to be a serf too?" You stop. The question shouldn't surprise you. He's been growing, observing, piecing things together, but it still feels like someone drove a spade straight into your chest. Yes, you say, because lying doesn't help. Unless something changes. What would change it? You wish you had an answer. You think about the stories, about men who ran, who vanished into the forest and reappeared in distant cities, free and employed. About towns where craftsmen can buy their liberty, where a full year and a day of hiding makes you no longer property. You also think about the man who tried to run last spring and was caught 2 villages over, dragged back with a broken leg and eyes full of fear. You squat down beside him, wiping mud from your hands. Maybe you'll learn a trade or you offer. Be a blacksmith, or a miller, or something better. "Better than you?" he asks. You smile, but it aches. Just different. Back in the village, there's news waiting. Bad, of course. There always is. This time it's Agnes from 2 huts down. Her daughter is with child, and the father is the Lord's cousin steward's nephew, some lad visiting from the city. No marriage is planned. No support will be given. The girl will be tied to this land now, like a fence post buried deep. It sparks whispered debates in corners and behind hands. Some say she should have known better. Others mutter about nobles using their rank like keys to everything they want. You keep your thoughts to yourself, but later that evening you catch your wife staring into the fire, silent. She doesn't need to say anything. You know what she's thinking. You're thinking it too. Your cousin and his new wife returned from their brief honeymoon, which consisted of a walk through the woods and a shared apple. They look tired, happy, and a bit scared. He jokes about building a hut by the edge of the pasture. She jokes about just moving into the stable. Neither is really joking. That night you share your food. It's thinner than usual, but no one complains. Your cousin makes a speech, terrible and long-winded, about family and gratitude. Your son falls asleep halfway through it. You're not far behind. As you lie on your straw mat, you listen to the sounds of the hut. Soft breathing, a faint snore. The crackle of the last bit of wood on the fire. Your wife reaches over and takes your hand. You squeeze hers gently, wondering if your son will grow up in this same room, or if he'll one day walk away from it forever. And you wonder what it takes to make sure he has that choice. Because that's the part no one talks about. You were born into this life like your father and his father and the fathers before them. You learnt the rules early. Stay quiet, keep your head down, survive. But now that you've raised a son in it, now that the laughter in his throat might one day turn into silence like yours, you start to question everything. What if the world could be something different? What if he didn't have to ask permission to love? What if his worth wasn't measured in barley, eggs and chicken feathers? You stare at the ceiling until sleep takes you. Outside, the wind shifts. Change is coming. You don't know what kind, but it's in the air. And this time it might not wait for permission. You wake to a sound you never want to hear. The wet, hacking cough of someone sick enough to worry about. It's coming from the hut next door, the small one with the slanted roof and the smoke-stained walls where old Meg and her grandson live. She's a fixture of the village, tough as leather and twice as wrinkled. You've seen her dig potatoes in snow, chase pigs barefoot, and outdrink men half her age at midsummer. But this cough isn't hers, it's the boys'. You go about your morning as usual because what else can you do? But your ears keep drifting towards that sound. It scrapes through the stillness, rough and rattling, like something inside him is trying to claw its way out. Your wife hears it too. She doesn't say anything, just stirs the morning pot of gruel with a tighter grip on the spoon. Illness is a strange kind of thief. It doesn't just steal strength, it steals time, plans, the illusion that tomorrow will be just like today. You never know how bad it is until it's too late. And in a place like this, with no doctors and no real medicine, it's a gamble you lose more often than not. Still, there's protocol. You head toward the far end of the village, to the hut with the painted branch above the door, the one belonging to Elswith, the herbalist. She's not quite a midwife, not quite a healer, not quite someone the priest approves of, but when you're desperate, you knock anyway. You find her in the garden, bent over a patch of fennel, muttering something that might be prayer or just a recipe. She doesn't look up. What's wrong? The boy, you say. Meg's grandson. She sighs. Another one then. You walk with her back toward the hut, carrying her satchel of dried herbs and mystery powders. The boy's inside, pale and sweating, eyes rolling under his lids like he's stuck halfway between dreams and fever. Meg sits beside him, wringing a rag with trembling hands. She nods when you enter, but her eyes never leave the boy. Elswith gets to work, burning dried sage, rubbing garlic oil on his chest, spooning something dark and bitter between his lips. You help hold him still. He kicks once, weakly, then slumps. Will he make it? Meg whispers. Elswith doesn't answer. You leave because it's not your place to stay. Outside, the village moves on, children chasing chickens, men hauling timber, the reeve barking orders about fence repairs. Life doesn't pause, even when it should. You get assigned to the mill today, hauling sacks of grain up from the lower fields. The miller is in one of his moods, snapping at everything, measuring the weight of each sack like he thinks you've stuffed them with rocks. You haven't. You don't even have enough grain to stuff yourself, let alone cheat. The air near the mill is thick with dust. It settles on your skin, in your mouth, clogs your nose until everything tastes like chalk. The wheel creaks steadily as water pours over it, powering the grindstone inside. It's mesmerizing in a way, turning and turning, never stopping. Like the seasons, like debt, like obligation. By midday, your arms feel like rope and your back has become its own weather system, aching and twitching with every move. You take a short break by the stream, drinking from your cupped hands and watching the current rush past like it's trying to escape the village altogether. You think about the boy, about all the boys. How many you've seen burn with fever, then vanish from the rushes and return only in whispered memories. You remember your own brother, long ago, sick by midweek, gone by Sunday, no warning, No reason, just gone. By evening, the miller releases you early. Not out of kindness, but because he's behind on his ledgers and needs mental clarity. You return home to find your wife boiling water over the fire, her face tight with worry. Not for the boy, for your own. Your son has a runny nose and a cough that's more annoying than alarming. But in times like these, even a sneeze makes your heart clench. He says he's fine, still playing with his wooden fox and telling stories about the king beetle he saw in the woods. But you press your hand to his forehead anyway. No fever. Yet. You spoon out the evening stew, more broth than substance, and watch him eat. Every bite feels like a victory. That night, a soft knock at your door. It's Meg. She doesn't say anything at first. Just stands there, small and shaking, eyes red, mouth set in a thin, hard line. You know before she says it. He's gone, she whispers. And just like that, the air in your hut changes. Death doesn't need fanfare. It's quieter than you expect. No screaming, no storms, just a silence that seeps through the walls down to the floor under your skin. You let her sit by the fire. Your wife wraps her in a blanket. No one says a word. The next morning, a cloth bundle is lowered into the earth behind the chapel. A few villagers gather, heads bowed. The priest mumbles a blessing with the same tone he uses when scolding children. He barely looks at the grave. Ellsworth isn't invited. Of course not. You stay after the others leave. You stand there, staring at the fresh mound of dirt, trying to understand how one day someone is here. Warm and noisy and real. And the next they're a story. A name. You hear your son calling for you in the distance. You turn, walk back toward the sound. That night you place your hand on his chest as he sleeps. Just to feel it rise and fall, he stirs. Mutters something about beetles again. Then quiets. You stare at the ceiling for hours, the darkness pressing in like damp wool. This life, your life, was never promised to be fair, but still, some nights it feels like too much. The pain, the loss, the way grief moves in and sits down like it owns the place. The next day the bell rings, and you get up, because you have to. By the time word spreads about the boy's passing, the village is already buzzing with something else entirely. It's not disrespect, it's just life. Barging in as it always does, uninvited and loud. A cow's gone missing from the south pasture. Someone's caught the miller's apprentice stealing flour. And the reeve, allegedly, was spotted stumbling out of the alehouse before midday with his tunic on backward. Naturally, these tales have mutated into full-blown stories by the time they reach your end of the lane. One version has the cow swimming across the river, like a monk fleeing temptation. Another claims the apprentice was actually the reeve's bastard son in disguise. You don't believe any of it, but you listen, because gossip is the glue that holds the geese's strange, muddy little world together. You're sitting just outside your hut, scraping the mud from your boots with a flat rock, when Joan the weaver's sister walks past and mutters something about manor justice being a joke. That gets your attention. When she sees you looking, she comes closer and drops her voice to a whisper, as if the wind might tattle. "They've called court," she says, "this Thursday, at the hall." You raise an eyebrow. Court means someone's accused someone else of something they may or may not have done, and now the whole village will be dragged into a performance of justice where the ending is usually predetermined. "Who's on trial?" you ask. She glances around. "Ellen, the alewife." That's surprising. Ellen's loud, sure, and her ale's either the best in the county or capable of dissolving barnwood, depending on the batch. But she's not someone who causes real trouble. "What for?" Joan's sister leans in further. "They are saying she sold short measures, watered down the Lord's cask." You whistle low. That's bold. Selling short to the regular folk is one thing, everyone does it. But watering down the Lord's ale? That's practically heresy. You go back to your chores, but the news itches at your brain like straw in a tunic. By evening it's everywhere. The alewife this, the alewife that. Some claim she cursed the steward when he caught her. Others say he just wanted an excuse to shut her down and open his nephew's tavern instead. Either way, you know the manor court isn't going to be about truth. It's about control. And besides, it's not the first time justice has worn a crooked face. You still remember when John the baker's youngest daughter got caught picking herbs from the edge of the Lord's private woods. Just a handful of nettles and thyme, nothing more. The fine nearly cost them their roof. And yet, when the steward's dogs trampled through your turnip patch last summer, you got nothing but an apology that smelled like wine. So on Thursday you walk to the manor hall with everyone else, The place itself is cold stone and stained glass designed to feel important. Inside, the air smells of wax and wet cloaks. The Lord doesn't attend these petty trials. No, he has better things to do, like hawking or rearranging his wine collection. The steward presides, sitting high above the villagers like a tired deity in a very itchy-looking chair. Ellen stands in the centre, arms crossed, chin high. She doesn't look scared. She looks angry. The reeve lists the accusations: diluted ale, dishonest trade, possible insult to the steward's manhood. The last part gets a few stifled laughs. The steward scowls. Ellen's defence is simple. I sold what I had, no more, no less. If the cask was weak, perhaps the barley's to blame, or the weather, or your cook's fat thumb. Gasps ripple through the crowd. You try not to smile. This won't end well, but by God it's entertaining. Witnesses are called. Mostly men who've drunk too much of Ellen's ale, and now struggle to recall anything beyond tasted a bit watery. One swears he saw her tipping a jug into the barrel behind her hut. Another confesses he heard from someone else she bought cheap malt from a travelling merchant. The verdict takes less than 5 minutes. Guilty. The punishment? A public shaming, a fine, and the temporary closure of her ale stand, until such time that she proves her loyalty and honesty to the manor. The steward says this with such smugness that you want to throw something, not that you'd ever dare. As Ellen is led away, someone shouts, "At least her ale's still better than the steward's jokes." You don't know who says it. No one does. The crowd swallows the words like it's protecting its own. You walk home thinking about all the times you've watched similar scenes play out. The miller underweighs your flour and no one cares. But God's forbid you miss a tithe or underdeliver your barley. Then it's public disgrace and lectures about order. The rules bend, but never in your direction. Later you see Ellen at the well, back straight, eyes sharper than usual. She's been fined and humiliated, but she looks dangerous. That scares you more than anything. That evening your cousin returns from his day in the forest gathering firewood. He says he saw strange tracks near the boundary stones. Boot prints, not barefoot, not animal. Could be someone travelling, but why that deep into the trees? Could be a poacher. Could be something else. You tuck that thought away. The woods are always full of things you'd rather not name. The next day, the whispers change direction again. Now it's about a young lad caught trying to steal from the priest's garden. A few months ago, that would have been a whipping. This time, the boy's family pays in firewood and prayers, and he walks free. You wonder if the priest's growing soft, or if he's simply tired of the reeve acting like he owns salvation. Meanwhile, the village is buzzing with the news that the steward's nephew will be opening a new tavern. Imagine that, right after Ellen's punishment. What an amazing coincidence. You and your wife don't talk about it directly, but you both know the score. Things are shifting. Lines are being drawn, erased, and redrawn in the mud. That night, after the children are asleep, she looks at you across the fire. Do you ever think they're afraid of us? You blink. Afraid? Of us? She nods. Not you or me exactly, but all of us, together. When we talk, when we remember. You let that thought sit in your chest like a hot coal. Because maybe she's right. Maybe they're not afraid of the ale being weak. Maybe they're afraid of what happens when the village starts noticing just how crooked the scales have become. Maybe justice isn't a matter of law anymore. Maybe it's only a matter of time. If you ask the priest, today's a feast day. Technically, it's the Feast of St. Modwenna, the one who supposedly turned water into wine for a monastery full of grumpy monks and once walked barefoot across thorn bushes just to prove a point. He tells the tale every year like it's the first time, his voice rising in triumph when he gets to the part about divine fortitude. Everyone nods politely. No one remembers who she is 2 days later, but it doesn't matter. It's a feast day, which means your tools stay hung on the wall, the plough stays in the shed, and for once your hands won't be blistered by sunset. In theory. The bell rings just before dawn, same as always, and you drag yourself from sleep with the usual mix of groaning and cold feet. The hut smells faintly of cabbage and smoke. Your cousin is already up, fiddling with his tunic laces like he's never dressed himself before. Your wife is baking something flat and slightly sweet, probably sweetened with honey that cost more than you'd like to admit. The baby has discovered that spitting is fun now, and your son is running around shouting about the miracle play happening in the village green later this morning. Feast days are weird. On one hand, they're sacred, solemn, soaked in religious obligation and heavy with ritual. On the other hand, they're your only real excuse to slack off without punishment and maybe drink a bit more than you should. It's an awkward blend of holiness and barely restrained chaos, like a wedding where the groom's sheep got loose halfway through the vows. You dress in your decent tunic, the one without too many holes, and help sweep the space in front of your hut. A clean threshold is good luck, supposedly. You're not sure you believe it, but you're not about to risk it. There's been enough bad luck to go around lately. The morning mass drags longer than usual. The priest is in rare form today, voice rich and booming, reminding everyone to keep their souls clean and their hands busy, which feels like a subtle jab at the alewife debacle, honestly. He tells a story about St. Modwenna healing a dying pig with nothing but a prayer and a splash of well water. You're not entirely convinced it wasn't just a healthy pig with a dramatic flair. After the service, people linger in the churchyard, smiling in that nervous social way. The air is crisp, the sky mercifully dry. Someone's already unpacking a set of wooden drums near the green, and the miracle play actors are clumsily hauling a makeshift stage into position. You spend the next hour helping hang fabric across the sides of the wagon they'll use for the show. This year's play is the harrowing of hell because nothing says festive like Christ kicking down the gates of damnation to rescue lost souls. You always enjoy the bit where the devils shriek and run around waving pitchforks made from garden rakes. Your son is already elbow deep in mud, trying to build a castle near the roots of the old oak tree. He's added the wooden fox as a gatekeeper. You sit nearby with your wife and cousin, nibbling on a bit of soft bread while pretending not to eavesdrop on the two women behind you who are whispering about who's pregnant, who might be pregnant, and who's definitely lying about being pregnant. The play begins with the usual flurry of shouts and confusion. Jesus enters, wearing a bedsheet and a wig that's clearly made of spun wool. The devils prance and sneer, making the children squeal. When the gates of hell are kicked open by a door stolen from the miller's shed, there's a loud cheer. Your son claps so hard he falls backward into his own mud castle. You help him up and wipe his hands with your sleeve, because why not, it's already filthy. At noon, the food stalls open, though stalls is a generous word. A couple of benches, a few crates, and the smell of fried onions. You manage to trade 2 eggs and a strip of rabbit skin for a mug of ale, and a hot cake filled with something vaguely meaty. You don't ask what, it tastes good enough. Somewhere behind you, a fiddler starts playing. The music's not refined, but it's fast, full of clapping and stomping. Your wife takes your hand and pulls you toward the dancing before you can make excuses. Your knees protest, your pride objects, but she doesn't care. You dance. It's clumsy, sweaty, and entirely ridiculous, but it feels alive. For a few minutes, you're not a serf. You're just a man with sore feet and a wife who laughs when you spin her too fast. Later, you rest beneath the tree, watching the shadows stretch across the field. The priest is making rounds, giving soft blessings and harder glares to those who look too drunk. The reeve is nowhere to be seen, probably nursing a sore head from the night before. You hear muttering near the bread cart, 2 men arguing over a trade gone wrong. One accuses the other of cheating. The other threatens to call the steward. The crowd watches with hungry eyes. Then just as quickly the tension breaks when one of them slips in mud and lands flat on his back. Laughter explodes. Even the priest chuckles. The argument dies before it becomes something worse. That's the thing about feast days. They're like pressure valves. A bit of food, a bit of just a drink, a bit of dancing, just enough to keep people from boiling over, just enough to make you forget, for a few hours, how little you own and how tightly your life is gripped in another man's fist. That night, after the sun has vanished and the torches sputter low, you return home carrying your son in your arms. He's heavy now, all limbs and dreams, muttering about foxes and fire and devils with funny voices. Inside the hut, your wife sets down the leftover bread. Your cousin is snoring already, curled up with a look of satisfaction that you haven't seen since the wedding. You sit by the fire and pull off your boots. Your feet ache. Your head spins slightly. But your heart feels lighter than it has in weeks. "I like today," your wife says softly, curling beside you, "even if it wasn't real." You nod. It was real enough. Because sometimes pretending is all you get, and sometimes that's enough to keep you going. The tithe collector returns before the week is out, just as the fields begin to green and the trees remember how to whisper. You're ankle deep in your turnip row when you see him coming, long cloak, narrow horse, and the same permanent frown etched into his waxy face like God himself had carved it with a dull knife. You straighten your back, groaning as your spine pops like old floorboards. Across the field, other villagers are noticing him too, and the mood sours like milk left in the sun. You were hoping he'd wait another month. That's what they said, wasn't it? The spring tithe wouldn't be collected until after planting. But of course the church has its own calendar, one that runs on the rhythm of bells, land, and endless hunger. So here he is, accompanied by 2 bored-looking guards and a cart that already rattles with clinking jars and baskets full of eggs that haven't even cooled yet. Your wife meets you halfway to the hut, wiping her hands on her apron. He's here early, you nod, or we're just always late. The tithe, as usual, is 1/10 of everything. Everything that matters, at least. 1/10 of your barley, 1/10 of your eggs, 1/10 of your honey if your bees survive the winter. 1/10 of your time, your patience, your dignity. The church calls it holy. You call it theft with a choir. You bring out the jar of beans you've been saving and a small pouch of dried herbs your wife tucked away in a basket under the floor. That's your offering? It's not much. It never is. You approach the collector like a man approaching a sleeping dog, unsure if today's the day it decides to bite. He barely looks up as you place your items in the back of the cart. Just makes a note on his parchment with a quill that looks far too fine for this village. Late with your honey, he says, not bothering to disguise the disdain in his voice. The hive failed, you reply. He snorts. All of them? Frost hit early, bees didn't make it. He makes another note, then moves on without a word. That's the part that always gets you. Not the taking, not even the smugness. It's the silence afterward. The way they just walk on like they haven't just scraped out the last piece of your winter survival plan. You watch him go hut to hut, collecting bits of food and fibre from people who barely have enough for themselves. Joan gives up a blanket she just finished weaving. Hob offers pickled beets and a handful of dried mushrooms. Old Meg, whose grandson's grave is still fresh in the churchyard, gives him a jar of barley flour and a stare that could curdle cream. He takes both with equal reverence. At midday, there's a pause in the collecting. The tithe cart is half full, and the collector retires to the priest's house for a meal, no doubt better than any of you will eat today. The villagers cluster near the well, muttering in low tones, checking on each other's remaining stores. Your cousin's furious. They took half the eggs, he grumbles, holding up a basket with only 3 left, and the smallest one was cracked. They'll bless it before they eat it, you say. Bless it? They should bless us for even giving them anything, you smirk. You first. Your wife says nothing, but her mouth is tight. You know that look. It's the one she wears when she's calculating how long your food will last, how many meals she can stretch from what's left. It's the same look she had when the last harvest failed. The look that keeps you up at night. In the evening, the collector leaves, cart creaking under the weight of his holy bounty. The priest waves him off with a smile and a small bottle, probably wine from the bishop's cellar. You wonder if the saints would be proud of all this. After the cart is gone, people shuffle home, quieter than usual. You can feel the hollowness settling in the village like fog. It's not just the hunger, though that's coming too. It's the constant reminder that no matter how hard you work, someone else is always holding the scales. That night you sit with your wife near the hearth, passing a chunk of bread back and forth. Your son is asleep, mouth open, one hand still gripping his wooden fox. Your cousin is out back checking on the chickens, counting them again like maybe they've bred miraculously since the afternoon. She's not going to make it through the summer, your wife says. You blink. Who? Ellen. The alewife. She's trying to reopen, but they've taxed her barrels. The new tavern's taking all the coin. No one wants to risk drinking from her casks in case the steward's watching. You sigh. She could sell in secret. She's thinking about it. I heard it from Mary. Selling ale without permission is dangerous. If she's caught, they could brand her. Or worse. You've heard stories from other villages. Punishments that don't leave bruises. Just scars that never heal. Is it worth it, you ask? Your wife shrugs. Is any of it? You stare at the fire, watching it flicker low and red. The tithe was smaller this time. You gave less than usual. You're not sure if the collector noticed or if he just didn't care. Maybe they're starting to expect less from you, or maybe they're planning something worse. Before bed, you kneel by your son and place a hand on his forehead. No fever, no cough, still warm, still here. That's all you ask for these days. The wind picks up as you lie down, rustling the thatch above. You wonder how many more tithes you can pay before there's nothing left to give. How much of yourself can be taken before you stop being you? How long before the 10th becomes a 5th? How long before you run out? You close your eyes and try not to dream of bees that never woke. Fields that never greened, and hands reaching always, always for more. There's a rabbit hanging by your door when you wake up, limp and freshly skinned, its glassy eyes still wide with the surprise of dying. You don't ask where it came from, you don't need to. The woods are right there, just past the hedgerow, stretching dark and ancient into the hills like a crouched animal of its own. And the rabbit? That's a gift. A dangerous one. Your cousin is already awake, pretending not to look at it as he stokes the fire. Your wife raises an eyebrow, says nothing, and starts boiling water. Your son peers at the carcass, fascinated, and just a little horrified. Should we cook it? Your cousin asks. You shake your head. Not yet, because Zwala rabbit might mean dinner. It also might mean trouble. Poaching, after all, is illegal. The forest, every tree, every root, every whiskered creature within, is the property of the Lord. The game laws are clear, and the punishments even clearer. A fine if you're lucky, branding if you're not, and a hand or an eye if someone decides to make a lesson of you. But you're not turning it in either. Because turning it in means someone goes hungry, and you're not foolish enough to pretend your neighbours don't poach when they need to. You've seen William disappear into the tree line with a snare line coiled around his belt. You've smelled venison on the wind when no one's had coin to buy it. You've watched children grow pink-cheeked after a night of stew when the garden had nothing left to give. So, no. You leave the rabbit where it is, hanging like a question you're not ready to answer. You head out to the fields, basket in hand, hoping for a calm day. But the reeve is already out, stalking the paths like a hawk with sore feet, waving his staff and shouting about damage in the barley rows. You don't know what that means yet, but you know it will cost someone something. By the time you reach your plot, the damage is clear, a deep set of hoof prints leading straight through your barley shoots, turning tidy rows into a flattened mess. Deer, maybe. Or a pig. Or a drunken ploughman with no sense of direction. Either way, the crop is bruised, broken, and probably unsalvageable in that patch. You stare at it, chest tight, the numbers already spinning in your head. Less yield, less bread, less everything. The reeve marches by, sees you standing there, and points with his staff. You secure your fence? Best I could, you reply. He snorts. Best's not good enough, is it? Then he keeps walking, muttering about fines and laziness and setting an example. You dig for the rest of the morning, trying to coax some order back into the field, but it's hard to focus. Your mind keeps drifting back to the rabbit. You picture it in a snare. Caught in a moment it couldn't escape, twitching once, then still. You think about the woods, how close they are, how tempting. You're not the only one thinking it. Later you see Ellen, the alewife, speaking in hushed tones to a young man with a bow slung across his back. He nods once, then vanishes into the trees. Not an hour later, someone else returns with a bundle tucked under their cloak and a satisfied look. It doesn't take a genius to know what's going on. They're poaching, quietly, systematically. Small animals for now, rabbits, maybe squirrels, maybe even birds. Nothing too large, nothing that would draw bloodhounds or a lord's fury. But it's starting. The forest is thick, tangled, filled with secrets. The priests say it's where demons live, where fairies steal babies, and the dead walk when the moon is wrong. The reeve calls it off-limits. The Lord calls it his, but the truth is the forest belongs to no one. Not really. And everyone knows it. You've gone in once or twice in your younger days, just past the edge. It's quiet in a way the fields never are. Soft, alive. It smells like wet leaves and moss, and something older than language. You've never dared go deeper, but others have. You hear the stories. A man who vanished for 2 years and returned with a limp and a silver coin. A woman who claimed to speak to trees. A boy who swore he saw glowing eyes watching from the canopy. That evening you sit with your family at the hearth, chewing tough bread and sipping thin broth. The rabbit still hangs by the door, untouched. Your son asks about the woods. You try to wave him off, but he presses. What's in there? You think for a moment, then say, everything we're not allowed to have. Your wife rolls her eyes. Don't fill his head with nonsense. But he's already staring at the forest through the open door, eyes wide, mind full of stories. After dark, someone knocks. You open the door to find William, cloak damp, face flushed. He nods once, doesn't see you speak, and hands you a small pouch. Inside 3 snare lines tightly coiled. He doesn't explain. You don't ask. You hide them beneath the floorboards, beside the dried onions and your last coin. That night, you sleep lightly. Every gust of wind sounds like footsteps. Every creak of the roof makes you flinch, but nothing comes, just silence and your wife's soft breathing and your cousin snores. In the morning, the rabbit is gone. No blood, no feathers, no trace, so it's just gone. You never find out who took it. No one mentions it, no one looks surprised. But you do notice that Meg's hands are steadier the next day, that Hobbs' limp seems less pronounced, that Ellen has a little more colour in her cheeks. The forest gives, quietly, illegally, kindly, and it demands nothing but silence in return. You've thought about it before, running, not just sneaking into the woods for a rabbit or climbing a tree to watch the wind shake the branches. No, you've thought about leaving, the real kind. The kind where you wake up one day, pack whatever scraps you can carry, and walk until your feet forget what they're leaving behind. You've never said it aloud, no one does. But you'd be lying if you said the idea hasn't kept you warm on nights when the wind slips through the cracks and the stew tastes more like wishful thinking than food. It starts creeping in again on a morning like this. Mist thick as wool, dew heavy hoe on the grass. Everything grey and still. You're out early, alone, mending the fence near the western strips where the wood's gone soft and the ground turns to muck the second it rains. You work with numb fingers and a dull blade, every knot and nail reminding you of just how stuck you are. Then you hear it. Not the wind, not the rustling of birds. Voices, low, urgent, unfamiliar. You crouch out of instinct more than thought and peer through the slats of the leaning fence. Two men, cloaked, faces shadowed by hoods. One's tall and lean, the other rounder, older, with a limp that slows him every few steps. They were not villagers. You'd know if they were. There are only so many mouths in this place and even fewer secrets. But these two? Outsiders. You don't catch much, just fragments. Coast road's clear. No toll south of Tettenhall. 2 more days and we're free. Then they're gone, swallowed by the woods like they were never there. You stay frozen for a minute, heart hammering. Not fear, not really, something else. That beauty of free. You finish your work distracted. Every time you tie a knot or drive a stake, your mind loops back to those men. Who were they? Runaways? Traders? Rebels? You've heard rumours of all 3 drifting in from other villages, a group of serfs who fled to the towns, an outlaw band hiding in the fens, a widow who bought her freedom with the dowry of her dead husband's third cousin. The reeve once scoffed at those tales, said only fools try to outrun their oaths. The Lord owns your bones, he said, tapping his staff on the earth. You can't outrun what you are. Maybe, maybe not. Later that day you bring water from the stream and pass the spot again. No sign of the men, but the feeling they left behind lingers like smoke from a fire you didn't start. At the well, gossip is already blooming. Mary says her cousin's husband's brother fled last year and hasn't been caught. Joan swears someone in the next village forged a freedom letter and passed as a freeman for 3 seasons before a priest spotted his branded hand. Ellen? She just smirks and says, "Why run when you can poison slowly?" The truth is, people leave. Not often, not successfully, but it happens. You once knew a boy, Ben, small and fast and clever with knots, who vanished just after his father's funeral, left behind a pair of worn boots and half a loaf of bread. The reeve said he was taken by wolves. The village knew better. At home, you find your wife weaving rushes into mats. She glances up. You're quiet. You hesitate, then say it. What if we left? She doesn't flinch, doesn't laugh, just sets her work down slowly. Go where? A town. A port. Somewhere we're not this. She shakes her head. We'd never make it. Not all of us. And if we did, what would we be there? You think about that. About sleeping on stone streets. About city guards with sharper blades than the reeve. About hunger. Colder and less familiar than the kind you've made peace with here. Still. At least we'd choose it. Choice doesn't put bread on the table, she says, and it doesn't stop the cold. Your cousin joins in, overhearing from the doorway. Ran once, he says, years ago, just for a night. Made it to the river. Spent the whole time shivering behind a barrel until a farmer dragged me back by the ear. Why'd you do it? He shrugs. Thought maybe the world would be different. It wasn't. Just bigger and wetter. You all sit for a while, fire crackling, the room heavy with silence. But you can't let it go. That night, after everyone sleeps, you slip outside. The sky is clear for once, stars sharp and cold. You walk past the chapel, past the fields, up the path that leads toward the edge of the forest. Not far, just enough to see the darkness beyond the last familiar tree. You stand there, listening. There's a sound in the woods, not voices this time, just the rustle of something moving, an animal, a wind, a whisper. You imagine walking into that forest and not coming back out. They say if you can stay hidden for a year and a day, you're free. That the law forget you, that the land forgets you, but the land never forgets. The next morning the village is abuzz again. Someone else is missing. Not a child this time, a man. Walter, the smith's second son, gone before dawn. His boots, his cloak, his tools, all gone too. The reeve looks furious. The steward is summoned. They post watchers near the road. A few men are made to search the woods, poking into hollows and shouting into the dark like the trees will give up their secrets. They won't. You pass Ellen on your way to the mill. She raises one eyebrow. Think he'll make it? You don't answer, because what you're really thinking is this. Maybe I will. They caught him. Walter. You hear it before you see it. Low whispers over at the well, a gasp from the smith's wife, the dull clatter of something heavy being dropped in the dirt. Then the reeve comes striding down the lane with that awful puffed-up look he wears when he knows he's important. Behind him, two of the steward's men are dragging someone between them. And there he is, Walter, mud-caked, bruised, one eye swollen shut, tunic torn down the side. His hands are bound in front with rough rope, and his left boot is missing entirely. His lip is cracked open, and there's blood dried across his chin like a cruel joke of a beard. No one cheers, no one even breathes. The entire village stands still, frozen like fence posts. You're standing near your cousin when it happens, and you feel him twitch beside you, his whole body tensing like he's ready to bolt. Not toward Walter, but away. Because what comes next isn't hard to guess. The law's not vague about what happens to runaway serfs. The reeve shoves Walter forward and he stumbles to his knees in the dirt, head down, eyes half closed. Someone behind you whispers, "They found him near the river." Another says, "He had a forged pass, said he was a tanner's apprentice." A third mutters, "They followed the boot tracks." The steward isn't here yet, but he will be. And when he arrives, he'll bring his judgments with him, heavy as stone. Your wife appears at your side, her hand slipping quietly into yours. She doesn't say anything, she doesn't have to. This is what fear looks like, pressed into faces, curled around spines, sitting heavy in the throat. Not just fear for Walter, but fear of what his failure means. He tried, and he got caught. They tie him to the stocks outside the church. He's slumped now, head lolling, and the first priest gives a short, sanctimonious speech about obedience and gratitude. To run is to reject the station God has given you, he says, voice raised. It is to declare war on order, on peace, on our Lord. You glance at your son. He doesn't understand the words, but he can see the bruises, and he knows what pain looks like. Ellen mutters beside you. God must be exhausted if he's got time to keep track of who farms which strip of dirt. You nearly laugh and hate yourself for it. The punishment is set to be carried out the next morning. Publicly, of course. These things always are. You don't know what it'll be, branding, a flogging, maybe the stocks for a week if the steward's feeling generous. But the worst part is that Walter's not going to be banished. He's going to be returned to the same life he tried to escape, now broken and marked. He'll live here again, eat the same bread, dig the same fields, but no one will ever see him the same way again. That night, the village is quiet. Not peaceful, quiet, like a blanket's been dropped over everything. Even the dogs seem to know better than to bark. You sit by the fire with your wife, neither of you speaking. The stew tastes bitter. The air feels stale. Your cousin doesn't come home. You find him later, near the tree line, staring into the dark. You don't have to ask what he's thinking. Could have been me, he says. You nod. Still could be. You nod again. The next morning, the punishment is swift. The steward arrives in his fur-lined cloak, flanked by two men with pikes. They untie Walter and drag him to the post beside the chapel, already blackened with old scorch marks. They are not flogging him, they're branding him. A blacksmith's iron is pulled from a brazier, glowing red. It's shaped like a stylized R for runaway, though it might as well mean remember. The whole village is made to watch. You hold your son against your chest, shielding his eyes, but he hears it. The hiss, the scream, the sound of something being taken from someone that they'll never get back. When it's done, Walter collapses. The steward says a few words about loyalty and example, then he mounts his horse and rides off like this was just another task crossed off his list. Walter is left lying in the dirt. No one moves to help him, yet. You know how this goes. For the rest of the day, he'll be left to sit with his shame as if shame weighs more than broken ribs. But that night, after the torches are out and the stars return, you bring him water. He doesn't speak. Doesn't look at you, but he drinks. That's enough. Days pass. The stocks are taken down, the bruises fade. Walter returns to work, though now he moves like he's not inside his own skin. His mother cries quietly at the well. The smith, his father, doesn't say a word, just hammers louder, longer. You're not sure if he's angry at Walter or at the world, maybe both. The rest of you go on, you have to. The fields won't wait, and the tax collector certainly won't. But something's changed, subtly but deeply. You see it in the way people glance at the woods now, the way they hold their children a little closer, the way no one mentions running anymore, but everyone's thinking it. You think about it too, but not like before. Before it was fantasy, a whisper, a wild idea wrapped in smoke and stories. Now, it's a question. Not if, when. Summer drips in slow and heavy this year, curling around everything like warm breath. The fields are thick with green, buzzing with flies and bees, and that constant background hum that makes your ears feel stuffed with cotton. You move slower in this heat. Everyone does. Shirts stick to backs, foreheads shine, even the cows look too tired to complain. It's the kind of summer that makes you feel like the world's holding its breath. Waiting. For what? You don't know. You're harvesting peas today. The kind that grow low and stubby, close to the dirt. You have to crouch the whole time and your knees pop like knuckles with every shift. Your son's beside you, chasing beetles between rows and pretending the pods are swords. He'll help for about 3 minutes, then lose interest and wander off to throw pebbles at nothing in particular. You can't blame him. It's too hot to care. You've begun measuring your days in silence. How long since the last loud thing happened? Since the last punishment? Since the last dim's death? It's been 12 days now, that's something. Walter hasn't spoken to anyone since the branding. Not even his brother. His work's been steady, clean, efficient, if anything better than before, but he walks like the ground might crack open beneath him at any moment. You watch him now and then from across the fields, a quiet figure in a wide hat, moving like a man who's buried something deep and dares it to grow back. Ellen's brewing again, quietly, illegally. You know because you've tasted it. She passes small bottles to people who ask in the right way, with the right tone at the right time. Nothing loud, nothing obvious, and the steward's nephew's tavern, it's emptier than he expected. Turns out people prefer beer that tastes like something, even if it carries a risk. You find a strange peace in the work this week. The kind that comes when your body is too busy to let your mind wander. Your hands know the motion of harvesting. Grip, pluck, toss, grip, pluck, toss. It's almost musical, and for a while you let yourself forget the weight of your name, your status, your oaths. Out here in the sun, bending and sweating like a beast, you're just a shape among shapes. Another moving part in the great aching machine of survival. But it doesn't last. Because this evening something changes. It begins with a sound, one you haven't heard in months. Hooves, dozens of them. And not the slow, clumsy kind of a plough horse or a village cart. These are sharp, rhythmic, fast, trained. You rise, squinting toward the road just as dust starts to lift in the distance like smoke. Then you see them. Riders. Armed. Not your steward's bored little guards either. These men wear chainmail and travel in a V, cutting through the path like they own it. Their cloaks bear a sigil you don't recognise, gold on black, a flame inside a circle. Keep your head down, your wife mutters behind you. She's already gathered the children close. You obey. By the time they reach the village centre, most of you have stopped what you're doing. The riders dismount with military precision, boots slamming into the dirt. They don't shout, don't sneer. Which is worse, somehow. That kind of quiet speaks of confidence, of power that doesn't need to announce itself. One man, tall, thin, with a scar like a river down his cheek, steps forward and unrolls a scroll. He reads in a voice that carries across the square. By order of the Crown and under directive of the Justiciar's office, the reeve and steward of this manor are hereby summoned to stand trial for failure to report full taxes, falsifying grain weights, and abusing their sworn authority over the king's subjects. You blink. Did you hear that right? There's a beat of stunned silence, then murmuring. Heads turn, people gasp. Ellen drops a spoon. The soldiers don't wait. 2 of them march toward the steward's house, kicking the door open without ceremony. 2 others head for the reeves. Neither man resists. They wouldn't dare. The authority of the king, especially when it rides in on horse and steel, is a thing even they can't laugh off. It takes less than an hour. Both are bound, questioned, and loaded onto a cart. The steward protests. The reeve pleads. No one listens. The scarred man simply tucks the scroll back into his coat and nods once at the rest of the riders. "Stay for 3 days," he says. "Maintain order." Then he's gone. The cart rumbles away down the road, taking your oppressors with it, just like that. The village doesn't move for a long time. It's Ellen who speaks first. "Well," just that. Your cousin laughs. It's not a joyful laugh. More disbelief than anything. Then someone else laughs. Then another. Then you. And for the first time in your entire life, you don't know what comes next. Later you sit by your door watching the last of the dust settle. The soldiers are still here, camped near the Tukrum, but they're not bothering anyone. One even helped Hob lift a barrel into his hut. Your son sits beside you, chewing a bit of bread and watching the soldiers with wide eyes. "Are they going to stay?" he asks us. "I don't know. Are we free now?" You look at him, at his tattered shirt, his sun-browned skin, his dirt-streaked cheeks. You want to say yes, you are, but you're not sure what freedom looks like yet. So you say, maybe. Maybe is more than you've ever had before, and maybe is a start. Freedom, it turns out, is a slow, awkward thing, less like a door flung open, and more like a rusty hinge creaking under its own weight. The steward and reeve are gone, and just like that, everything changes. Or rather, nothing changes at all. Not at first. You still wake before dawn, you still trudge to the fields, you still spend your days bending your back under the weight of soil and expectation, but there's a space now, a gap. A sun is where their voices used to be, and people notice. At first, it's in small things. No one calls roll at sunrise. No one checks how many sacks of barley you've threshed by noon. No one hovers during distribution day to ensure the right people get the biggest loaves. Without the steward and reeve barking orders, the village runs on inertia, because that's all you've ever known. Until someone finally says, "Wait, what if we didn't?" It starts with the barley field behind Joan's cottage. It's not hers, technically. It's Lord's land, just like all the rest. But her husband died last year, and she's got 2 boys and a bad hip and has been barely scraping by. The field hasn't been used in years, choked with thistle and stone, and so she starts digging, quietly, carefully, and no one stops her. You walk past one morning and see her crouched in the dirt, sleeves rolled, hands blistered. She looks up at you, eyes squinting in the light, and smiles. Not a big smile, but the kind that means dare me to stop. You don't. You offer her your hoe. That evening word spreads. Joan's taking land, just like that. And no one in a fancy cloak has appeared to drag her off, or charge a fee, or make her swear blood loyalty under a crumbling crucifix. A few days later, Hob expands his cabbage patch past the usual boundary stones. Ellen starts hanging dried herbs from a tree that used to belong to the manor's hunting path. Your cousin, never one to miss an opportunity, sneaks out with 2 other lads and fixes up the old grain shed that's been rotting by the edge of the forest since before you were born. The soldiers still lounge at the village green, but they don't interfere. One of them even helps Joan carry a water bucket. Another buys ale from Ellen with coin that doesn't smell like sweat and shame. They're not here for you. They're here for the king's justice, and for once it doesn't feel like that's something you should fear. But justice doesn't always arrive in tidy lines. On the 4th day, a stranger appears. You notice him from across the green. Tall, thin, dusty boots and a satchel slung over one shoulder. He doesn't speak right away, just walks, head down, lips moving as if counting steps. You think he might be a monk at first, but his robes are too plain, his eyes too sharp. By nightfall you hear the whispers. He's from the priory, he's from the manor, he's from the tax office, he's from nowhere at all. The truth arrives the next morning, in the form of a scroll nailed to the church door. It's not from the steward or the reeve, it's from the new administrator appointed by the crown. Apparently, since the old authorities were removed for corruption, the manor lands are being re-evaluated. Temporary land redistribution is allowed. That's the phrase that catches your eye. Allowed. Allowed. You stand in front of that scroll for a long time, staring at the word like it's written in gold. Temporary, of course, always temporary, but it's more permission than you've ever been given. And then the real surprise, you get a letter. Delivered by hand, sealed in wax, not addressed to your lord because he's gone. not pass through the reeve because he's disgraced. Your name written clearly, not just the ploughman or tenant 3, your name. You crack the seal with dirty fingers and unroll it slowly, as if it might burst into flames. It says you've been granted stewardship of your plot, for now. If managed successfully and without disorder, it may become permanent. May. You read it twice, then again. It's not ownership, not freedom, but it's more than chains. You go home and show your wife. She reads it, eyebrows raised, and says nothing for a long time. Then finally, we should build a fence. You nod. It's the most practical thing you've heard all day. The next few days pass in a blur. People are building everywhere. Fences, pens, storage sheds. The old stone wall near the pastures is repaired overnight. The priest even opens the church cellar to store grain. Says the Lord would rather it be full of wheat than rats. For the first time in your life, you see people acting without fear. It's strange, almost terrifying, because if there's no one telling you what to do, then what are you? You stand in your field one evening, hoe in hand, staring at the straight rows of barley you've tended since spring. It feels different now, not like you're doing someone else's work. Like maybe, just maybe, this soil is listening to you. Your son runs up behind you, breathless from chasing fireflies. Are we lords now? He asks. You laugh. No, not even close. But we own the field. You shake your head. We work the field, that's different. But no one can take it. You don't answer that. Because deep down you know they can, but they haven't. Not yet. And every day they don't is a kind of miracle. That night the village gathers at the green. No cause, no feast day, just people talking, laughing. Someone's playing a flute, and someone else brought a pot of stew that smells like meat for once. You sit on a log beside your wife, your son curled against your side, warm and sticky and safe. Ellen raises a mug and toasts no one in particular. Joan tells a joke about a bishop and a cow. Your cousin brags that his chickens have finally learned not to peck each other to death. And for the first time, truly and fully, you feel like this place belongs to you. Not because a letter says so, not because someone granted you permission, but because you're here, because you've bled into this soil, because your hands know every inch of it, because your child is growing up on it, chasing bugs and dreams and fireflies through a field you planted. It may not last. Nothing ever does. But tonight, it's yours. Harvest creeps in like a slow grin, yellowing the fields day by day until they shimmer gold in the sunlight, like the land itself is trying to dress up for the occasion. It's a strange thing, seeing it all ripen without dread trailing behind. No steward barking about quotas, no reeve lurking with his tally stick. Just you, your neighbours, and the sudden realisation that every grain you gather might actually stay in your own hands. It almost feels illegal. You wake early before the first bell and the world is soaked in fog. The kind that clings to your eyelashes and makes every sound feel distant, like you're walking through a half-dream. The scythe hangs heavy in your hand, its edge newly sharpened. The handle smooth with age and use. You look out over your strips of land and feel something stir in your chest. A mix of pride and anxiety. Because now the harvest really matters. Now it's not just about paying what's owed, it's about keeping what's earned. The others are already gathering. Joan's boys with their stubby knives and boundless energy, Hob with his crooked back and slower pace, your cousin in a tunic that might once have been red but is now the exact colour of turnip soil. There's a strange energy in the air. Not quite joy, not quite panic, but something close to both. Maybe freedom feels like that. A little terrifying, a little thrilling, a little too good to believe. You cut the first swath yourself, careful, even ceremonial. The stalks fall with a soft whisper, and you try not to think about the fact that if the yield is poor, there's no steward to blame this time. It's your field, your harvest, your responsibility. Your son follows with a small basket, gathering what he can and missing half of it. But you don't correct him. Let him believe it's a game for now. Let him think the world is gentle. By midday, the sun has burned off the fog and the fields are full of movement. Arms swinging, sickles flashing, dust rising like a fog reborn. Sweat slicks your back, your hands ache, and your stomach rumbles, but you don't stop. No one does. Not even when someone's goat breaks loose and barrels through a row of beans. Not even when Mary slices her thumb and wraps it in a bit of linen without so much as a wince. The pace is frantic, urgent. Everyone knows the weather can turn in an instant. And this year the harvest isn't just survival, it's proof. Proof that you can do this without lords and reeves and taxes that strip the marrow from your bones. Proof that the land doesn't belong to titles or signatures or seals, it belongs to those who bleed into it. You break at sunset, collapsing into the grass with your wife beside you, the child asleep against her knee. You stare at the sky, the clouds stained pink and gold, and for a moment you feel like you've stepped into a painting. Everything is so still, so beautiful that it doesn't feel real. Ellen walks past with a jug of something strong and sour smelling. She offers you a swig, and you take it without asking what's in it. It burns. It tastes like smoke and defiance. You hand it back and wipe your mouth on your sleeve. They said we couldn't run a village without them, she mutters, scanning the horizon. And yet, you reply, gesturing to the bundles of wheat already tied and stacked. She smiles without showing teeth. And yet. That night, no one eats alone. Someone roasts a hen over the communal fire. No one knows whose it was and no one asks. A woman you've never spoken to hands you a slice of cheese. Hob brings out a fiddle and plays a tune so old it might be older than the church itself. Your cousin drums on a bucket. Your wife claps along. Your son dances like his bones are made of honey. And just as the stars begin to gather above, the priest clears his throat. Everyone quiets, not out of fear, but habit. He stands, robes dusty, hair wild, eyes tired, but kind. I've been asked, he says, to bless the harvest. He lifts his arms, pauses, then drops them again. But I think it's already blessed. A ripple of laughter follows, warm and unforced. He shrugs. So let's eat more then. And you do, later. When most of the food is gone and the wine is thin and the fire burns low, your cousin leans in close. I heard something, he says, about the steward, about the reeve. You raise an eyebrow. They are being held in Tettenhall. Not a trial, not yet, but people are talking. About what? He glances around, leans closer. About giving us the land, all of it. Official, not just these patches we're squatting on. Your breath catches. That's not how it works. Maybe not, he says, but maybe it could. You want to believe him. You really want to believe him. But you've lived too long under the thumb of men who call themselves generous while bleeding you dry. You've heard promises before, heard them break like ice in spring. Still maybe. You wake the next morning to the sound of crows arguing above the thatch. The air smells like damp straw and wood smoke. You stretch, wincing at the ache in your shoulders, and step outside. The fields stretch out before you, dotted with sheaves and bundles. There's still more to cut, still more to store, still more to survive. But this time you're not doing it for someone else. This time the sweat belongs to you. The blisters belong to you. The bread will too, and that changes everything. The harvest lingers into the next week like a guest who overstays but still brings wine, welcome, and tiring all at once. The days stretch long, full of sun and thistle, of aching backs and calloused hands. Everyone is moving constantly, cutting, binding, hauling, storing. The barn by the church creaks under the weight of sacks stacked higher than ever. Even the priest has taken to hauling grain between prayers, sweating through his robe and mumbling about the humility of labour like he just invented it. Your own plot has yielded better than expected. Fatter barley heads, stronger stalks. Maybe it was the mild spring, or the extra hands you borrowed from Hobbs' brood. Or maybe it's just that you finally cared in a way you hadn't before. When the fields were someone else's concern, you did the work because you had to. Now you do it because you need it to matter. It changes how you move, how you measure time. You notice things. Soil texture, shade angles, wind direction. You listen to the birds for signs of weather. You kneel beside your rows like a man praying, only your prayers go into roots and reach upward in stalks. And while your hands work, your mind wanders to that letter, still tucked in the clay pot beside your bed. The one that says you're a temporary steward of the land. You've read it so many times the edges are soft as linen. You know it's fragile, conditional, riddled with words that mean nothing and everything, temporary, pending review, subject to oversight. But still, it's the first time your name has sat next to a piece of earth and not been written in someone else's ink. There's talk now, more open, less whispered. People wonder aloud what comes next. Whether the crown will grant true title to those who've worked the land this season. Whether you'll be allowed to stay legally without the shadow of a steward overhead. Rumours say that other villages are facing the same question. Some say the king himself has sent messengers to see how self-managed manors are faring. Others claim the crown just wants more grain for the war in France and doesn't care who grows it. Still, it's a possibility, and that alone is dangerous, because possibility births hope, and hope, in a serf, is a wild and unpredictable thing. You find yourself watching the road more often now, not for raiders or wolves or tax collectors, but for couriers, letters, decisions, something from far away that might change everything again. But for now, you harvest. Your son has taken to carrying bundles on his shoulder like he's already 16, he's 10. You let him. Not because it's helpful, he drops half of it before he reaches the cart, but because it makes him stand taller. He's never known the world before, not really. And now, for the first time, it feels like you might be building one worth giving him. Your cousin's fence is coming along. Haphazard, but proud. He even painted the top slats with leftover ash and water, drawing crude animals, one of which is either a sheep or a lopsided bear, depending on the angle. Ellen's drying racks are fuller than ever. She's got barley, beans, apples, even a few wild mushrooms she insists are edible. Her son claims one glows in the dark. You decide not to ask questions. One evening, as the sun turns everything gold and the sky slides toward violet, a stranger arrives. This time it's not a soldier. It's a scribe. You recognise the ink-stained fingers, the thin shoes, the way he walks like the road is beneath him, not part of him. He carries a satchel of scrolls and speaks to no one for hours, just walks the village, observes, nods. Eventually he sets up at the church with the priest and starts calling names. Yours is on the list. When you step inside, the room smells of parchment and beeswax. The scribe doesn't smile, doesn't introduce himself, just gestures to a bench and unfurls a scroll. His handwriting is so perfect it makes you angry. You are presently listed as steward of field units 3 and 4, he says, without looking at you. You nod. You've fulfilled the required duties for this season. I have. He scratches a mark with his quill. Any disputes over the boundaries, shared tools, grain allocation? No. Complaints filed? None that I know of. He pauses, looks up. Would you like to make any complaints? You blink. You hadn't expected that question. You think about Walter, still walking with a limp and a branded shoulder. About the reeve, the steward, the old way of things. You think about saying something, but instead you just shake your head. No, you say, not today. He makes another mark, rolls the scroll back up with military efficiency. You'll be notified of final standing before the winter solstice. That's it. No seal, no handshake, no promise, just a polite dismissal, and the sound of your boots echoing on stone as you walk back out into the light. It should feel like nothing, but somehow it doesn't. That night after supper, your wife asks what the scribe said. You repeat his words exactly. She nods slowly, chewing a piece of soft bread, the last of the season's first loaf. You think we'll be allowed to keep it? She asks. You want to say yes. You need to say yes. Instead, you say, we've already kept it this long, or she smiles. Not because that's a good answer, but because it's the best you can do. Later, as the stars gather and the children sleep, you step outside, the air smells of hay and wood smoke and the clean distant promise of rain. You walk the boundary of your field, the rows neat and trimmed, the soil soft beneath your boots. You run your fingers along the top of the fence. It's rough, homemade, slightly crooked in the northeast corner. But it's yours, and for now, that's enough. You sit down on the edge of the field, lean back against the fence post and watch the stars flicker into place. Not with fear, not with bitterness, but with something like peace, something like pride. The first frost lands quiet, without ceremony, but the world wakes changed. Leaves lose their grip on the trees and fall like tired hands to the ground. The fields, so recently golden and bustling, are brittle now, dead stems and dry soil and the ghost of harvest in every breath. The wind whistles different, more insistent, like it remembers something you've tried to forget. Winter is coming and no one is ever ready. You walk the edge of your plot, boots crunching the frozen thatch beneath you. The barley's long since stored, sealed in clay jars and burlap sacks, and tucked away in the back of your hut under heavy quilts and heavier prayers. Your wife's taken to muttering over them in the evenings. Not quite spells, not quite blessings, just words, protective, stubborn words. You don't stop her. Whatever works. The village moves slower now, cautious, like every footstep might break the ground. People are stocking root vegetables in pits, gathering firewood into nervous towers, patching thatch with whatever scraps they can find. The wealthiest family in the village has lined their walls with old cloaks. The poorest family? They have just moved in with their cousins. And still, beneath it all, that quiet hum remains. Low, steady, dangerous. What comes next? The scribe's visit still echoes. No one has heard anything official since. No letters, no messengers, no seals stamped with the king's crest. Just silence. Heavy, uncertain silence. You half expect the steward to come riding back in one morning with a sneer and a scroll declaring that the land was never yours, that the crown has changed its mind, that your fence is now trespassing. So far, nothing. The silence stretches into days, into weeks. It begins to feel permanent. And that's the worst part, because now you live with hope, that sharp, double-edged thing no one warned you about. One morning, not long after frost first bites the roofs, your cousin shows up at your door with 2 rabbits slung over his shoulder. He beams, chest puffed. "Trade one to Meg for beeswax. We'll have candles through midwinter." You raise an eyebrow. "You didn't?" "No," he says, waving a hand. "Legal as sunlight. Got them from William's traps. He's been keeping a ledger. Wants to make sure no one gets accused of poaching if the soldiers ever show again." You chuckle. William keeping a ledger? That's a twist. But you feel it. That tension. That tightrope you're all walking. Because the law hasn't caught up to reality. And until it does, you're living in a strange in-between, neither free nor bound. Landowners in name but not in ink. It's a cold kind of freedom, but it's yours. That week, you spend every spare hour chopping wood. The pile outside your hut grows into a haphazard wall, and your shoulders ache with every swing. Your son helps stack, his small hands clumsy but determined. He asks if the snow will be deep this year. You say probably. He asks if you'll build him a sled. You say maybe. He asks if you'll still have the land come spring. That one you don't answer. Around the village, the signs of winter preparations are everywhere. Ellen's ale is thicker now, darker, brewed with dried apples and bitter herbs. Joan has woven blankets from anything she could find. She even used the hem of her wedding dress. Hobb's taken to repairing shoes, for a bit of honey or even just firewood. And Walter? Walter walks straighter now. The limp remains, but the Ymir seems to have melted into something else, something heavier, quieter. He works the same field he always has. But now there's a small wooden marker at the edge of it, carved with his name. No one asked him to put it there. No one commented on it. But no one touched it either. One afternoon you catch him watching the road, same as you sometimes do. He glances at you, nods one, and says, "Think they forgot us?" You reply, "I think they're waiting to see if we starve." He laughs at that. The sound is rough but real. On the first full moon of frost, a package arrives. No rider, no soldier, just a bundled sack left at the chapel door, tied with twine and sealed with red wax. The priest finds it before dawn, sets it on the altar like an offering. The village gathers around as he breaks the seal, fingers trembling like it's holy. Inside, parchment, bound and marked. 10 scrolls, one for each household with claimed land, one for you. You hold it like it might bite, then slowly you unroll it. Your name, your field, your offence. The words are dry, legal, cold, but near the end one phrase stands out, short and strange and life-changing. Permanent tenancy granted upon continued service and peace. You blink. Permanent? The priest reads his aloud, confirming it. Around you, people murmur, some cry, some laugh. Joan collapses onto the chapel steps. Hob just sits down in the dirt and stares at the sky. You find your wife's hand and place the scroll in it like it's gold. She reads it, then reads it again. Ours, she whispers. Not temporary, not pending. Ours. You step outside into the cold air. It tastes different now, like freedom, yes, but also like responsibility. You'll owe a fraction of your yield, of course. There will still be rules, still a crown above you. But no steward, no reeve, no one with the power to take your field away just because they felt like it. That evening the village glows. Not from torches, there aren't enough to go around, but from within. Every home feels lit from the inside. There's stew on the fire, laughter in the alleys, and in the silence between a weight lifted. No more branding for running. No more silence when justice is denied. You walk your field at dusk. hands in your sleeves, boots crunching frost. Your son trails behind, asking what kind of crops you'll plant in spring. Your cousin shouts from his hut that he's naming the biggest chicken Duke. Ellen's humming some old tune that no one knows the words to. The stars come out one by one, and for the first time you look at your land, this narrow strip of earth carved from centuries of ownership, and think, this is where I belong, not because someone told you, because you chose to stay, because you made it yours, because you endured, and because now, finally, there's nothing left to run from. Word count 1 to 100, awaiting continue. Wind down. Final 300 words. So now the seasons turn again, as they always do, softly, slowly, almost without asking. The snow will come soon. It'll blanket the fields you harvested with such care, press against the walls you mended, and creep through the roof that still needs patching in the corner. But you're not afraid of it. Not this time. You've been through worse. And now you've got something to stand on. Something that's yours, not because a lord gifted it, but because you refuse to let go. At night, when the fire crackles low and the world outside hums with frost and foxes, you lie with your wife and child curled close and listen to the wind whistle around the corners of your home. You've still got debts, still got duties, still wake with the aches of work that never ends, but you also wake with purpose, with pride, with a patch of land that answers when you speak. No banners fly above your roof, no titles wait beside your name, but you have freedom now, not the loud kind with trumpets and speeches, but the quiet kind earned by inches, the kind that comes from planting, from building, from staying when others ran. You are a serf no longer. You are something else now, a farmer, a tenant, a father, a free man. The land beneath you knows your footsteps. The wind knows your scent. The crows watch you from the fence post like old friends. And come spring, when the frost melts and the shoots rise again, you'll begin once more, because that's what the free do, they begin again.